everybody. It is your good friend, Dr. David Proden from down here in the North Star recording studio. And believe it or not, the snowflakes that you see on your screen right now are authentic because it is snowing here in southern Wisconsin. 3 to 5 inches of snow tonight. So I'll be out shoveling tomorrow. But you know what? I'm sick and tired of it snowing down here in the North Star recording studios. So I'm going to make it disappear with, whoa, it's gone. We're gone. So yeah, thank you to everybody who is tuning in. We have a special guest today. And all right, here we go. Whoa. All right. Okay. Hang on. There we go. Okay, here we go. All right. Here we go. This is again Safety Doc Podcast. We are welcoming Lee Jarvis to the show from the state of Tennessee. Now, Lee and I have been in contact for the last couple months about putting a show together. He has vast knowledge in intellectual property. We think about intellectual property as, you take a picture and you use it somewhere and someone, asks you, hey, do you have permission to use that photo, or do you have permission to use this video clip or whatever? We see it all the time with claims against, especially third party, coming forward with claims on this. So this is a big thing. We also had a bill, right? The CARES bill. And this is coming through right now with some components for digital copyright. So we want to make sure that we have that, kind of fleshed out. So disclaimer from the start, Lee and I are not attorneys. All right. We are not. That is not our thing. Here we go. So yeah, we are not attorneys. So do not take this as legal advice. Have your due diligence. If you are, receive a notice that, hey, you've posted something. So yeah, that would be the best route to go. But a couple things here. So Lee and I were talking before the show, and back when I was in college, I was about to play in the Sega Genesis Super Bowl, and I remember this. My roommate Nate and I went to public television. So let me. All right. Okay. All right. Just a second. Hang on, bud. All right. So my roommate Nate and I were supposed to play in the Sega Genesis Super Bowl, which would have been hosted by the Stevens Point Public Access. And what happened is the Stevens Point Public Access, we got there, we got the Sega hooked up, everything was ready to go, and then they said, "Oh, we can't do this because it would be copyright infringement." So there's the last minute. If you're wondering how that game turned out, I did win it, 55-48, with a last-second throw to Sterling Sharp for a completion. I was able to run out the clock, and that was in the year 1994. But yeah, we couldn't televise it, so we learned about that. So intellectual property. What we're going to talk about today, and I'll have Lee give an introduction of his background. What we're going to talk about today is, what is intellectual property? Why was it made? What does it cover? As far as copyright, patents, we know that patents expire faster than copyrights and trademarks, for example. I'm working on a trademark right now for some content for my book. It expires in like 3 years. You have to re-up trademarks, but copyright is different. Problems with IP. IP wasn't really designed for the internet age. So what happens? So yeah, it is definitely looking like, we are out of touch right now with contemporary IP. How can you improve intellectual property? or for example, fair use. People think if they claim fair use on something, they can use it, right? Fair use is a defense once you get to court. So you just can't put it up as a shield and say, oh, this is fair use. You can't sue me. A judge would make a determination on fair use. So Lee's going to talk about that. How can we improve intellectual property? How can we make the system better? Because what's happening is there's more and more software that goes through and scrolls web pages and videos and things like that. And it matches little clips, right? So if you stream something, if you have a photo, if you had a photo that is copyrighted, you don't own the copyright. Now that'll show up. So what are the consequences if we don't address this? And then also, what's the latest? There's a bill, right? In Senator Tom Till's Digital Copyright Act of 2021, take down, stay down. What does that mean? But welcome here to our show, all the way from Tennessee in the United States of America, our good friend, Lee Jarvis. Lee, welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast.
Hello, everyone.
All right. Lee, your audio is a little rough there. Anything we can do to help you? I know there's some Tennessee communication issues.
Okay, if that's a fan.
Yeah, so hang with us here. Lee's working through some things.
Fair that way. I did it in my still
All right.
days.
Yeah, can you maybe reboot it there, Lee? It's really chopping right now. Again, Lee is in Tennessee. We know Tennessee's had some communication issues. Lee and I were on the show before. Thought we had things pretty well worked out, but hang in there. Hang in there. So greetings to our friend Joe Dolio in the state of Michigan. Joe Dolio in Michigan, and also our good friend Phil Henry. So yeah, Doc doing esports 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. I had a in television in 1979 at Christmas. I received that. Promptly played my brother in basketball and defeated him that night. We stayed up. So, all right, Lee, are you rebooted, buddy?
How's the audio?
It's good. There you go.
I switched from the RTX to the hardware.
All right. Again, there are some complications with communications right now in the state of Tennessee. That's where Lee is at. But it looks like we've got this clear. Jeremy heard about this bill thing. So Lee, tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm a 40-something. I'm a disabled 40-something with just a lot of interest in technology and how some laws are supposed to work but don't work, the processes of things. I've always kind of been interested in intellectual property because they've changed things almost every 5 or 10 years. In the 90s, you could make backups of anything. In the 2000s, that got reduced to certain things with the caveat that you can't break digital copy protections in order to make a backup of the stuff you buy.
Oh, right.
That's DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
So Lee, what is just give us an understanding here. What is intellectual property? And I guess I'll give a little feed into that because people use different images for podcasts or blogs or in newsletters and things like that. What is intellectual property? Give us an example of how that's defined.
To keep it as simple as I can, it's you owning a unique idea. Patents deal with devices, but copyright deals with more general, broader subject matter like literature and such. The more common or the more kind of vague it is, the harder it is to copyright. But as systems and process gets more easy to find things, that common usage is going to peak out fast. It's going to hit a peak fast.
So when I'm thinking about intellectual property, so if somebody takes a picture, they own the rights to that picture. Is that correct? But then if they upload it to like
For the
Google,
most part, for the most part, yes. If you have two people taking a picture of the same thing and it's the exact same image, but one's copyrighted, you may have some strangeness going on, especially if the photographer is really sue happy. But most of the times, a lot of those pictures are very unique. So they're hard to duplicate or replicate by just anyone with an equivalent, camera.
so we talked about too. It wasn't that long ago when people might go onto YouTube, they would be streaming a Nintendo game, and then they would get contacted by, themselves playing Nintendo against someone. And they'd be contacted by Nintendo saying, "Hey, knock that off, take it down."
It's
Um,
they're
so tell us about that, because I see a lot of those things
on
online.
YouTube. Nintendo and Sega are two of the most litigious that have been the most litigious for against streamers. But this was when Let's Play was big, so we're talking 5-10 years ago.
Okay.
Basically, people streaming a game, and Nintendo wants control over that distribution. But over time, Nintendo's wised up to this whole streaming thing, and they don't do it as much, but they still kind of do it. A lot of other game companies, they don't. They're not as fussy.
No. So yeah, I've seen, I know a couple of my friends who stream, live, like Grand Theft Auto and things like that. But I wasn't aware that, Nintendo was jumping in and telling some people to knock it off. So how about right now? There was a bill. What was it? The Prince dancing baby. Can you tell us about that? Because I've seen that image on people's websites and things like that. What was that all about?
Oh goodness, let's see. Well, let's see. I believe it started in 2007, and where in the world is my notes? Oh Lord. Anyway, it started in 2007 and it ended in like 2017. There's basically, I got kicked back between the courts to figure out, well, is it infringing? Is it not infringing? And I don't have my notes, of course. I thought I had them all open, but it took them something like 10 years to figure out, and the Supreme Court wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't. They don't want to know what fair use is.
Right.
But go ahead.
Oh yeah. So this ended up as a lot of people had this image they were using, right? Either on web pages or sharing back and forth. And it's basically just a baby dancing around to this, I don't know if it was a Prince song or whatever, a movement. And then, you said it took 10 years for this to be resolved. And I saw it was just kind of resolved recently. But yes. So, what does it mean for like someone like me? If I were to have that on one of my blog pages or my website or something like that, how do I know what the ruling is? What am I supposed to do? What's your thought on that?
Well, some of this has already been trotted out in the courts, so they know that it's not going to be an instant win. But if the laws change, they have an opening to try it again with somebody. Somebody's always the test case. Every few years, someone's a test case, like in the mid-2000s. I'm pretty sure it's the mid-2000s, but some of the music industry found someone who was sharing music, and they sued them for 150 grand. I think it got knocked down to like 70 grand, but they're still on the hook for that.
And this was back like in the Napster LimeWire days?
I think it was a bit past that.
Okay. So when they sued this person, this was like a quote unquote typical person, right? This wasn't somebody downloading all of this and then redistributing it and making money and stuff like that. Allegedly, right? This would be a typical layman who they're like, you did this, we have the
Well,
IP records.
the newer file sharing technology is you're downloading something while uploading bits. You're uploading and downloading to try and get a swarm of information. So receiving it is harder to sue over than distributing it. The law tends to focus on distribution. So if they can find that you're distributing, then they can come after you.
Okay, so that's really the intent. So you mentioned this person who they sued for like $70,000. To your knowledge, were they distributing it then, or were they just downloading it
Well, that's
off of a torrent stream?
well, that's the thing. See, in this swarm of data, you're downloading a little bit and you're uploading a little bit.
Okay.
So you're not exactly. It's decentralized, so you're not exactly a site that's trying to spread this information. You're just some random person downloading bits of information.
I have a comment from Jeremy Arthur in the chat, and he says, going back to the gaming discussion, it would seem that game companies would want people to share their experiences with their consoles. Is that kind of your take right now? You said like Nintendo and Sega, especially Nintendo, is kind of backed off.
I would think that the old adage, any advertisement's good advertisement.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Nintendo has always been insanely litigious. They went after game copying in the 90s, so they've always tried to be ahead of the curve in some ways just to protect their distribution of their IP.
Right.
We've kind of gotten to a middle point where a lot of companies aren't really looking at Twitch and YouTube as quote unquote infringers. But there again, if law changes a little bit, that means that there's blood in the water.
And what I'm thinking, Lee, from our discussions, and Leo and I have talked extensively, shared a lot of information. Is we there's a creation now of these new algorithms or these new scrubbers, which I'll call them, which are going through web pages, old YouTube videos you have up on different, like your website or whatever. It could be something from 10 years ago. And if they're matching content, right, then there's this new third-party interface, which has kind of come to life. And these third parties then are jumping in and saying, hey, you stream this Nintendo video, this Nintendo game, narrated at whatever back in, 2007, and you owe $800, stuff like that. So I think this is, as you said, going like from this point forward, I know people who stream games, and it seems like that's largely accepted by the industry. I also know people who have gotten approval to do this. But yeah, I think there's also this weird rear view mirror of like, whoa, I streamed something, like back in whatever, and now these scrubbers and streamers or these scrubbing devices, right, are going back through all of these web pages and all of these videos, and they're trying to match things up. And so it gets to be this real weird forensic process of, hey, you did this 10 years ago. And you post this, I don't even have the links to that website anymore. I don't even know the password. I thought I took that down. It was like with Homestead or something like that, some free website. So, what are your thoughts on, I guess maybe this is the whole thing too, of like why IP doesn't really work in modern times.
Before I get to that, Carl H made a pretty good, had a pretty good statement. It sounds like they just grabbed someone at random and decided to throw them up against the wall. Not quite random, but
yeah, Carl, our friend from New Jersey. Yeah, absolutely. And I thought so. I remember, as we do, Napster and LimeWire, right? The networks, so you could just download.
RIAA was going absolutely insane over it.
And it was just crazy, right? And I also remember then you'd read these articles about some individual being sued and then, ultimately whatever, settling or something. But it was just someone that they made an example out of, like Carl said. So I guess, yeah, lead us up to that, because I'm seeing with more of these scrubbers, for example, people are contacting me and saying, or I'm becoming more aware of it, of saying, hey, like I was notified of something I put on a blog 7 years ago or something, that we streamed, and there was something in the background, and now there's this third party coming after me. And I guess with, LimeWire and Napster, people should have known, obviously, when you're doing that's illegal content, or illegally obtained content. But so yeah, what is your thought? Are people being kind of singled out, saying, hey, we're going to come after you? Or is this like going to the robot, or not the robots, but the algorithms are going to make this more common, where people are going to be getting these notices left and right?
As long as it's an official part of the IP owner and licenses and whatnot, I think what we'll see is they will attempt to find it and then try in some way to negotiate with you, even though the way they negotiate is heavy-handed. But they'll try a way to work with you before they move it to the courts. It's really going to be up to the courts to figure out, what's grandfathered in and what needs to be dealt with. And I almost want to say that the way things are going, we're going to be looking at reverse class action suits.
Tell us about that. What do you mean?
Where thousands of people are infringers, so they're all bundled together and they pay, 5, 10, 20, 50, $100 each. I mean, if the law will allow that, that is. I'm not 100% sure if the law will allow that, but it sounds logical. I mean, that's what a class action is, where, hundreds, thousands, millions of people gather together to sue this one giant entity. Well, the reverse could come into, existence.
Well, go down that rabbit hole a little bit more, because I'm trying to figure out what that might look like.
Okay, so let's say BGM, the one that tried to do a Christmas album that had copyright stuff in it. They're a huge publisher of copyrighted music, and they've been found to infringe on copyright. But let's say they have compiled data from various services, and from various services like scrubbers or just websites and whatnot, and they've compiled the data and they moved to class action. If there is a process for reverse class action, I am not 100% sure about the law, but if there is, this may well become a thing where a giant corporation sues, thousands of people who have done minor infringement, and then all of a sudden they're on the hook to pay petty to not so petty cash out to the industry for infringement of the laws that are very vague and wonky.
Okay. So you're talking about these laws vague and wonky. So here's a misperception I believe many people have, that fair use does exist, and there are conditions where somebody can claim fair use. For example, if they're using it for educational purposes, if they're using it for satire or critique. So like if they're showing a clip of a video and they're saying, the director did this, I'm critiquing how the director set up this frame in a video and things like that. So you're actually, analyzing, critiquing the video or the picture or so forth. So that's one aspect. Another part is like there's a scholarly part of fair use, meaning if you're using this for quote unquote scholarly advancement,
education.
Yeah, I think they're separate though. I think there's an education component and there's a scholarly component. But as you said, like who really knows, and what are examples? And I think people believe if I get called on something, right? If I get called on this post on my blog or this thumbnail for my YouTube video, or whatever, I'll just take it down, right? No harm, no foul. Or else I'll just say, I did this under fair use. This was not meant to, or I think another one is if you're using it for newsworthy purposes. But the thing is, people
fair
don't.
use.
Yeah, people don't realize, right, Lee, that fair use is determined by a judge. It's not
for the most part because it's so vague. But
so
also there's how things are going right now. I would say that you are okay trying to critique things and using a decent amount of something, but not running it back to back, trying to break up the content where you can kind of show that you're not trying to show the whole thing, the whole product. I think that right now that is kind of easily protected, but we're moving to a point to where fair use, news, education, all of that is up to a judge.
right, right, and that's the point I think people miss on this is that if somebody comes after you, I guess, and makes a claim on this, and you claim fair use, it's like, okay, either they're going to press it, and I believe small claims is pretty expensive for most of these, but or else if it does go to small claims, it'll be a judge who will say, yes, your I guess defense of fair use is valid or not. And I think people are under. I say this because I teach school administrators, and they regularly get notifications in their schools because schools have a lot of web pages and third grade websites that are up and things like this, and there are images which are copyrighted which get posted, and then the school will get notified by one of these third party groups saying, hey, you have these images and you have to take them down, and not only take them down, you also have to pay us this fee of $800 per image or something. I've seen these, like they've brought these in and showed them to me. And of course they're saying, well, we're a school and whatever. And for the most part, they don't respond to these things. But on the other hand, some do. Some are like, okay, we owe $2,400 because 3 pictures were up that were copyrighted. So we took them down and we just paid $2,400 in this really weird format, right? You have to pay like in Bitcoin to some place in another country using only like a money order. I mean, it's the most, all these things that you're like, once you get down this, these things get to be really convoluted of how you're supposed to pay somebody. But yeah, people do it, right? Because they're afraid. They're afraid that they're going to be, sued. And so also, Lee, how do you recommend people verify that they're just not part of a scam, a target of a recipient of a extortion email, versus like, because I guess what I'm saying is that's happening right now a lot. Mm-hmm. People are receiving these emails from especially these third party, companies saying, hey, this was on your website. Now you owe, this amount of money to make it right. And people are like, well, whoa. So walk me through your thoughts on that. Like if somebody listening here was to get that, Mictobus, for example, was to get that email tomorrow from this company saying, hey, Mictobus on your website. Yeah, you had an image of, whatever here, the Grand Canyon, and we know that this matches an image that was taken by, Bacon Maldito, and who copyrighted it.
Their name, you take their number, even location, and you look it up. That'll help you, trying to figure out a little bit of what they are. Once you figure out kind of what they are, then you move to the next step of seeing if they have any valid claims, Google searches and whatnot.
Right.
I mean, I'm reminded of problems we had 10 or so years ago with the robocalls. You would get a robocall and they would be recording for affirmative statements like yes, and such, so they could bind you to a contract.
Right.
It's a gray area in law that can be used to potentially profit. Of course, these are almost, they're all pretty much trying to scam you out of money. But of course, you've also got the scrubbers that aren't exactly doing due diligence, and they have public domain stuff listed in their scrubbers, and they send out copyright warnings over the public domain stuff, and you have to show them that
Yes.
you're using public domain. I had a Fallout 4 video with some old oldies music on it, and it was in the public domain, but I was still hit for something.
So that brings up a question in the chat. Mick Biss wrote, makes me wonder how all those old amateur fitness channels my wife watch are allowed to play recent popular songs as their background music and stay up. Like, any thoughts on, is it just because the scrubbers haven't got to them yet, or?
Well, I hate to say it, but Twitch and YouTube are kind of similar in that if it's not too dicey, not too spicy, and it's making money, they'll ignore it until there's a precedent to, nuke it from orbit.
Okay.
They let a lot of things go because, it's a big nebulous system. You can't exactly fault them because Section 30 pretty much gives them a lot of protection. Or at least I think it's Section 30. Section 20?
Yeah, that's Section 230. Yeah.
230.
So what I'm seeing is different though. So what I'm seeing is, right, if I upload a video to YouTube and I pay for a company, I have a license for the audio tracks. So, but every once in a while, like YouTube will flag it and say, like, this is copyrighted
You'll have
audio.
to show them the license.
And then I need to go, there's a process with the company I work with, and they say, okay, if you get a copyright claim, let us know then and send us a track and we'll resolve it. And they do. It's real fast. But
hopefully, at least for, quote unquote legitimate stuff, that they'll kind of make a process to where you can put in your license information and
right.
kind of it won't hit you as much.
So is it possible, Lee, that you could use something that was not copyrighted 3 years ago? So you use an image that you pull off of a site which identified it, I guess, as being in the public domain, free for use. And between that, the time you use that and now, someone has gone in and copyrighted that image. And now suddenly you're getting a notice. You're like, well, when I use this, like, it was public domain, and now suddenly it's copyrighted. What's the risk of something like that happening?
Generally, when something's in the public domain, it kind of stays there. What you have is something new that's somewhat similar but regardless, like if you took a picture of something with a copyrighted image in it, it's in the background. Well, this company is making money off finding these images and suing people because this image is being distributed. The courts are going to have to test it. The courts, I don't think it would get far, but the way things are going, they might default to the letter of the law. You're distributing, that's all that matters.
Right. And this can come in play with, like, we're thinking these are big groups, big companies who are being targeted, but it could be individuals, right? And it could be someone who's used a graphic on their church bulletin.
Anything that's copyrighted.
Right.
Anything. John made an interesting comment about it being, is it on social media? It's anything you distribute. Anything you distribute can be copyrighted.
Right. Okay. Wow. So give me your thoughts. You wrote about complicated law, banned accounts, blocked content. So
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And again, as people are listening to this and thinking, whoa, how does this affect me? Like, how does this affect how I should put together my blog, my channel? What if I'm streaming, part of something in my channel as a critique of it, like, or historically, like, now do I have to go back through my work? What do you see with IP and current times and how it's starting to manifest in kind of this very unusual way?
Well, how it's working today, it's a bit lopsided and nebulous and vague. It's not great, but we can do some things to protect ourselves. If your business depends on it, I would suggest that you use the least amount of it that you can, especially if it specifically for review, critique, whatnot. If it's just adding a little flavor to something, you're probably better off not using it at all.
So when we think about what's IP, the first thing I think about is pictures, right? But it's more than pictures. What else?
Anything, any kind of unique idea. Patents deal with devices, copyright deals with literature, images, videos, sound, music. If it's copyrighted, then the copyright owner has near absolute control over its distribution. There are a few instances where you can override that, like with the first sale doctrine, which allows us to resell the stuff we buy. Of course, we don't buy much these days. We're on subscriptions or licenses, but that's to deal with today's nonsense. But, oh Lord, brain fart. But in order to, less is more. We need to be careful about what we use. I don't think that right now, this minute, if you just, if we had a repeat of Prince's dancing video, it would just be, removed. Or if, Prince was pretty litigious to take just about everything down, but if they just wanted to claim it, it could stay up and they would get the ad revenue for it.
Okay, which is kind of what we see often on YouTube.
Yeah. You'll get a strike for something, or not a strike, but you'll get a claim, and then you can okay it, or you can remove the audio, or whatever is the offending proportion of the video.
Okay, so there's a comment by Jeremy Arthur. So sharing the content is infringement. Personal use is okay. What's your any takes on that?
Let's see.
So I guess, and Jeremy, maybe if you can elaborate on that a little bit, but I'm assuming, like, if it's an image or something you download and you're not distributing it.
Yeah, okay, I see it. There's a lag in my head.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just something really cool that you want to study more, or some, like,
personal usage, you're not distributing it. You just have it. See, the copyright IP law, copyright deals strictly with distribution. And you have a smartphone, therefore you're a distributor, so you better watch what you say. But I don't think we have to worry about that yet. But that is a possibility.
Yeah, that they could trace that you've downloaded the image or whatever. But I'm kind of with you. I think that's pretty far out there, unless someone has gone into distribution.
Copyrighted image that you might have, when you share something with somebody else, or you say a sentence that's from something that's copyrighted, the system can, look at this, this is infringement. So, now what?
Wow. So give me your thoughts on, okay. First of all, and I've seen this in the chat a little bit, but if you were to receive, Carl, yourself, something tomorrow from a third-party company, we've talked about some of them out there. I won't talk about any of them by name, but you receive something from a third-party company saying, hey, Carl, like, you posted this on a website or in a newsletter or whatever, it's copyrighted, and you need to take it down. And also you need to pay us $1,000 because you've done this. And it's a third party, right? So this isn't it's not necessarily the owner of the image. And you're like, whoa, this is different than YouTube, because on YouTube, if I violate, I get a notice, and it's usually, do you want to edit this out? Yes or no? Or else like the video is not monetized or whatever. It's not this heavy-handed thing of YouTube saying, by the way, you've just been fined $1,000. How would you respond to that if that notice came to you? And again,
Well,
it's
take a name and number and try and figure out what they are. But I would also share this with the local police. I am not sure what departments, because we're kind of in new territory, but I know they have just general scam, a department that deals with scam and whatnot. So you could, talk to them about it.
okay. So I think maybe one of the takeaways here is, in some of the research that I've done, is there's a large net cast, right? Because it doesn't cost much now to have these software programs go through page after page after page on the internet. And if they make a match, then, they find out who owns the page that's on the website or whatever. And then they send out an email or a letter. And making this request for this, not only to take this down, but then this payment of a large amount of money. So, I mean, if you're getting something like that, I would guess 5-10% of the people pay that right off the bat, because look at how, I just believe that there is a large level of compliance with that. I mean, 1 out of 10. I would guess.
That's how scammers get by, is that 1 to 10% that actually fall for it.
And people are like, I don't, okay. And so I think it's educating people of those types of things. And then I guess you can always, try to locate if it was the original, owner of whatever. But I think good advice, right, is always take something down if you're made aware of it. Somehow, if you're using an image that you thought was not copyrighted, or someone provided it to you and you were, again, under the impression that it wasn't a copyrighted image, and then you're notified that it is, take it down immediately. But again, I'm very leery of these companies coming out and saying, yeah, you owe whatever, because again, I see these school districts getting hit with this consistently now, because the scrubbers are getting better. The technology is getting better. So they're just going page after page after page and finding these things, and people saying, well, I'm just going to pay it. And that doesn't mean there's another company out there, right? that all these companies work together. There could be like 100 companies, and they all find the same thing and send the same exact notice. So what can we do to fix this system? I mean, how can we make IP
with the system we have? Put hard definitions in fair use. So you have the normal fair use now, but you have a hard percentage of time that you can use, or you have time and quality percentages. So if it's like very, very, very low quality, it's not going to compete with the copyright owner. If it's small snippets of the whole thing, it's not going to compete with the copyright owner. These would at least give us a buffer, but it doesn't fix the inherent problem of the nebulous system based on distribution.
Right, because it's owning and then it's distributing. So how would you propose this be fixed? Because here's what I see. If this isn't resolved, the technology is just going to exponentially improve, right? So these third-party companies, for example, are going to find more and more things that potentially violate copyright. They'll be notifying people. There might be people who are summoned into court, and so forth.
That's why I say that it might evolve into a reverse class action.
It could go right over the top of the dam, right? We could all of a sudden in small claims court have 100,000 claims for copyright, and it would just log jam the system or block the system. It would basically destroy it, and people would be terrified of anything that's IP.
It's kind of like the pot laws. I mean, it's a pretty. I mean, you can say what you will about it, but there's so many people that are in the system. The system is spending so much money on it that do we really need to have laws on this? Because the system can't handle the cost burden.
Right, right. Because you'd almost have to create like a specialized court just to handle
I mean,
this.
you're creating you're basically creating a new criminal class. Tongue tied.
So Scott Celestial made a post. He put Congress is prohibited from passing ex post facto laws by Clause 3 of Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution. I don't know how to respond to that. I'm just wondering
Well,
if
when it comes to the Constitution, I hate to say it, but the Constitution doesn't really matter. It's what law currently ebbs and flows with. Law goes by the precedents that are set, and it goes from there, which doesn't help when government goes out of whack, and then it wouldn't have gone so out of whack if they stuck to the Constitution. But they're always trying to sidestep or enhance the meanings of the hard rules in order to make a new law to show to their voters that they're doing something.
and that's right. So I mean, I don't have an answer beyond what you've just provided to Scott on that. I'll have to look into that a little more or get more of a clarification from Scott on that. But wow. Okay, so again, we come back to solutions on this. Like here's something, right? You and I were talking about this. There was a research study with time of coronavirus, the last like 8-9 months, and it was out of the National Institute of Health. Basically, it was lay people and professionals sharing information online, like schematics to how to print like not only mask but how to print ventilator parts and these types of things. So if you had a 3D printer, you could make these. So you could be at home. It could be me. I could be making a ventilator part on a 3D printer and giving it to my local hospital. And there were thousands of people participating in these sharing of schematics. And I looked at that and I looked at the study and I'm like, this is interesting because it shows that you can really scale in an emergency to produce things all over the place, right? Like, if you need things produced, you just have to share the schematic. But on the other hand, somebody's going to come forward and say, well, that's based upon a design that I have a copyright to. That's my intellectual property, which someone just took and rewrote into a schematic. And so basically there's no amnesty in the time of emergency, quote unquote, like coronavirus to do this. And what happens like if you print a ventilator part and you're using it and it fails because like a high school student invented this part and it gets vetted. So how does intellectual property, how do you think this, again, we're talking, how can we improve it? And I think this whole 3D printing thing of sharing schematics, and I have friends
file on to the court cases.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about that.
Well, liability laws are pretty consistent. So it might fall to liability, it might not. But you also have, if you're manufacturing, well, it's like with the gun stuff for 3D printed for 3D printers. Lawmakers are treating 3D printed guns the same as any manufacturer. So the rest of the law, I assume, will follow that train of thought that you have become a manufacturer. And whatever, like with a knockoff fashion wear and whatnot, you're basically generating pirated goods.
Okay. Wow. So I guess, how can things be fixed without getting to gridlock? Because I'm looking at this, we've had conversations, you shared information. It seems to me like we're headed toward a gridlock situation. People are almost afraid to dabble in intellectual property because someone else will say, I own this, or, they'll be
We're getting
challenged on it.
definitely getting there.
Or even like people that produce, the producers, right? People will produce things and people will be hesitant to purchase it or
Streaming
license
has
it.
been booming for the past, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, tell us about
How
that.
many small businesses? I mean, those are small businesses. All your streamers that are actually making money, well, they're living, in a local city. They're paying local taxes. They're a small business, and if the system isn't balanced enough, well, there's the death of small business. A lot of small business. Now, it might not creep over into, non-online business as much, but it will creep over as everything gets digitized and all the data goes into the system.
Right. Wow. Well, we talked about like censorship, consequences of IP laws, data redaction, censorship. We saw with the election, right? Twitter jumping in, taking down stuff that they claimed couldn't be verified or whatever with COVID and election stuff, whatever. But now with intellectual property, where do you think things are going to go with data redaction or censorship of people claiming like that's my intellectual property that was shared, or there'll be some scrubber match, not only an image, but like maybe a song or a statement or a speech or whatever, and it'll just be removed? Or like because what I envision on this, Carl, is there could be this massive censorship, which is all automated. It's all of the
Well, Twitter already does that.
Yeah, exactly. We've already tasted how the automate how the algorithms go in and clean things off. And I have a friend that does an outdoors channel on YouTube, and he said in the last 6 months, like a lot of his stuff within the first hour, there's something in it which is completely benign, but it matches or whatever, and it gets idolized. It's idled for like 24 hours and then released or whatever. But
that doesn't save you from the scrubbers, but at least you're armed with information to give YouTube. If they'll use it however they see fit to use it. Before we get into the censorship aspect, if anybody knows any resources to help people negotiate copyright law, please give them up. More information is always good. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, please do. I contacted, so I teach a few legal classes at a university level, and I contacted a lawyer this fall who nationally specializes in IP claims. It mostly, my question was, I'm teaching at teachers plus school administrators, and they're getting inundated with this more at the school administrator level. What are some things that I should tell them, and what are and basically what he affirmed was, yes, these third party scrubbing devices are out there, and now these companies are coming forward, and he did name a few of these companies, which aren't very hard to find, I guess, if you were to do a search. And if you receive anything from these companies, contact, take screenshots and whatever of what is there, and contact your lawyer on how to proceed. He said sometimes, or actually a lot of the time, he said it's not doing anything, right? It's taking the image down. But he said it's of course, again, we're not giving legal advice here, but that's what he was sharing to me, is to time capture, what they're saying that you have, which is violating, remove it, and then seek with your attorney, which seems kind of crazy, right? Because none of us have an attorney in our back pocket to do this stuff. But
well, that's how the lawyers get their money. They help make complicated law so they can stay in business. I hate to say that, but that's kind of how it plays out.
Right. Wow. This is
the censorship angle is always going to be kind of hit or miss, but they can claim copyright infringement and just cut you off because they don't really have to prove what you're saying is factual or not, they can just decide right then and there, and just poof, you're gone.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I have no idea how to counter that. You were talking about Senator Tom Tillis. So we have this new legislation. What is it? The new CARES bill coming out at some point, and with that, there's been a lot of talk about Digital Copyright Act of 2021, streaming and all that. If for example, if you stream stuff, you could have 10 years in jail as a felony. Tell me what you know about that, and if anybody listening, what that might mean to them, or if it's, again, as I read one article, it's like, this is targeted at the big violators, and I'm like, whoa, that's like a subjective term to say big violators, because I'm not sure that's exactly how that would play out, but
they're primarily targeting the sites like YouTube and whatnot, but there'll be carryover, and they'll target the highest grossing streamers or anybody else with money, and then there'll be, I don't think it directly targets common streamers, but it could. It easily could. Oh, what was that?
So what I see also, Lee, is it's easy to go online, right? And if you type in like Family Guy on YouTube, like 100 people have made Family Guy best clips from last year or something, and they just like completely just clip things from Family Guy and post them. There's no critique of it. There's no anything, and they've got like 200,000 views. I mean, are these the type
the system might already have that monetized? The IP owner may already have all the claims on it, so the channel is not making any money, that or making very little money off the video. It's like other people said, well, what if you have just a tiny bit of content, of copyrighted content in your content that's hours long? Well, it doesn't matter. YouTube tends to just monetize it to the IP owner.
Okay, so in YouTube, it's probably not that big of an issue. How about Bacon Maldito writes, what about filtered pics, videos, cover songs, and you and I altered content? You and I talked about this. Like, you could go into Adobe, right? I could go into my Adobe, and I could make minor changes to anything or apply a filter. What does that mean?
I've not heard any cases, satire or parody, dealing with Photoshop, but I'm sure if you go far enough along that it would get to satire and parody, which are better covered parts of fair use.
But what if it's not like satire or parody? What if you just take an image of whatever, and then
just just cropping 3 or 4 things together,
putting a filter on it,
pictures of Obama or Trump with
like
different
Old
things.
West filter.
Of course, they're public people, so they don't really have a copyright, quote unquote. But all of those random things, if it's if you can see the copyright, then it's infringing. If the IP owners are litigious, they may come for you. If they're not, then you don't really have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Right now, streamers are basically, people who talk over, background music or have images show up in their videos and whatnot. Right. They're kind of the main target of the CARES Act.
And that, because what I read is, some of these people are making like $1 million off of other people's content. But again, I'm like, oh, that's okay. Like, I understand you'd want to go after that, I guess, but you're also going to be catching somebody in there who is, I guess, not using things for the intent of profiting off of distribution. I don't know. I don't know enough about the legislation, except, it's gotten a lot of media coverage in the last week. And what this might mean for people. And I guess there's always this thing of, what does this mean retroactively? Like, what does it mean if you did this? You live stream part of a Whitesnake concert 3 years ago, and while you were like there, and now what's the deal?
Well, if is the IP owner, going after, some of the bands and singers do not like their content being, shown around too much. But if they start going after it, there's a good chance they may come for you.
Right. And that's where we've said that, this thing of, is there going to be some, legislation or reverse class action for people to get out of this? Or because this is a small claims court thing, right? I mean, that's my understanding for most of this is it's processed through small claims court. And this could be
claims is under 500.
I'm not sure. I guess what I was looking at is I was researching some of these cases, and for example, it would cost if someone was to file a lawsuit because of, let's say, an image or part of a song that was used in a YouTube video, it would cost them, anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000 to file that, plus like consult with their attorney. And so, there's some barrier into this, right? Like, because there's a barrier, it's keeping a lot of lawsuits at bay right now. But I also wanted to get into, like, what do you know about Creative Commons? So Phil Henry,
just a little bit. Same for general user license.
Yeah,
it's a lot of reading. Of course, anything much is a lot of reading for me, but it lets you know what your limits are, so you can more comfortably and safely navigate licenses and rights, copyright.
So, and Phil brought up a great point here, Lee, and that's that, nobody teaches Creative Commons or fair use, really, like at a university level. Like, I mean, I have 2 master's degree and a PhD. Never was covered once, like anywhere.
Well, it all centers around distribution, and we've really only, when did the smartphones really become popular? What, middle 2000s?
Right.
Late 2000s? So we've only had 10, 15 years or so of steady progress in that people can share more and more information. Well, there's a lot of copyrighted information that's being shared, and not in a file sharing sense of way. Well, that's something new for the lawyers to latch on to.
Tell me more about that.
Is it fair that, like simple, quote unquote, fair use? Is it fair to people that fair use is so vague that they could be hit by a random lawsuit? Of course, as court cases pile up, we'll know more about fair use. But like with the Prince thing, in 2017, the Supreme Court said, "Nah, we ain't touching it." So you're going to need something huge to basically get people's attention, because if people don't see it, they don't really care.
Wow.
And that kind of drives me crazy, because everybody's a distributor, and copyright focuses on distributing the content. And I keep trying to think of ways to balance it out, but any way you go, it's a rabbit hole. But there are better ways to do it than what we are doing now.
Like what? So if you could reinvent the system tomorrow,
I would just a simple, make it as simple as possible. Okay, if you want to trade unlicensed content, you pay in a cut of your revenue intake. No fuss, no muss, just whatever you bring in, a cut goes to the IP owners. How that's distributed is a rabbit hole in itself, but you get the general idea. Revenue sharing. If it's traded, the IP owners get a cut, and everybody else is able to focus on business and trade. No fuss, no muss. As the conservatives always say, get out of the way of business. Well, IP owners, get out of the way of business. IP owners are their worst own enemy. I hate to bring up Star Wars, but they weren't targeting, the fans with that. There's also Mass Effect, which went downhill because they weren't really targeting the fans. They were doing everything they can to find a new demographic to sell to. Well, if people could make their own Star Wars films, it doesn't matter, who, what, when, where. All of that is paying to the IP owner. So you'll still have, the IP, the rights is a commodity. It should be treated more like a mine that people can go into and pay a percent on what they bring out.
Okay. So basically, I guess tell me more how that would work.
Okay. Ooh, I've only written like 10,000 words on this. Okay. Well, I keep trying to, boil it down and boil it down and boil it down. So basically, my system is 20% default max cut. This means that whatever your revenue intake is, and that's from donations, merchandise, anything, all of that, 20%, you can either, divvy it up into what's selling, and you break the numbers down and pay out to the IP owners from that max 20%, or the industry can make a system that does all that. But any which way you do it, the 20% is the default. We still have licensing, we still have fair use, we still have public domain. For the IP owners, IP does not expire. And if you focus on, trade and not distribution, you could even potentially get rid of first sale doctrine, because, we're focusing on the trade. And, when people, sell off things, a little bit of that goes back to the IP owners. Every little bit would help, go to the IP owners, who will be focusing on investment. See, they're on the investment end, and everybody else can focus on, content creation.
So I think the part of this too is, we're looking at this, or not what, but I think when people hear about IP and all of that, they think of a defensive position. Like, somebody could be identified as having intellectual property that they don't have rights to, but there is this other side, which you've been mentioning quite a bit, and that's the people producing this need an audience, they need consumers, and if the system gets gridlocked, everyone producing IP is
all
going
of
to
the
suffer.
file sharing sites make ad revenue. They're making money,
Right.
but it's all illicit money. You go to poorer countries, people are selling copies of stuff and knockoffs of stuff. Well, all of that is valuable trade you could tap into, because that is what the market can bear. We make very big, dumb, artificially bloated systems that go against go against common trade. It's all too big to fail. So it's all, our whole market is based on investors investing in investors, or executives investing in each other. They gamble on each other. It's just, it's basically a nightmare.
Yeah. And so copy, so, let's make this, clarify this also. So a trademark lasts, I believe, about 3 years. I know that because I'm going through a trademark process right now for some of my work. And then it needs to be.
And you also have to be aware that you need to protect your trademark. Trademarks, you have to find any and all violations and deal with them.
Right. So we have the short window and trademark, and then patent is longer.
It's kind of like that. It's longer. It's a little bit more costly.
And then, but copyright is this long amount of time, right? So
right, it's like I think they got 70 years, or 50 years plus the life of the creator. But the problem is that the creator is no longer the owner anymore. So we have, the Disney problem, 100 years.
Right. So it's like almost, how does that keep up? I mean, how does, without almost having to change copyright? So copyright expires, has a shorter duration, maybe copyright is 20 years or 30 years before things go into the public domain?
I think 5 or 10 year cycles would be the best for it because it forces an interest on that IP. You know, having anything in the market sit in one place too long, I think, is not good. So, cycle it around. You get fresh blood, you get new creativity. If it stays in one place too long, I don't think they're maximizing its potential. Because what they're doing now is they're just sitting on stuff, doing nothing with it, but they own the IP, but they're not doing anything with it because they can't maximize it because they can't make every cent they can off of it. When they gamble, they want to make back, 1,000 times what they invested into it.
So what Phil Henry just wrote was, if the holder of the copyright dies, like in the case of Popeye the Sailor, it becomes public domain after 70 years in Europe. In the US, it's 95 years. Of course, there are exceptions. So as you said, this, by just locking this stuff up, we're going to run into the big messes that are going to be coming out, right?
Because we're focusing on distribution, the long time span just means that the system has more things to figure out, and the system will be buried.
Yeah, absolutely. The system is just going to go. It's going to be insane because here are the problems, right? One is these scrubbers, these algorithms, these electronic. You just imagine like someone has a office building and all they have is computers, which are just bringing up all these web pages and trying to match against these images and video and audio clips and things like that. So that's happening. And then pretty soon, like that will end up in all of these notices going out to people. And then it's also,
that's a good one. Red Crusher made it very good. Very good. The reason they keep putting out poor content to extend copyright. Because if it goes unused after a certain period of time, it has to be forced into the public domain, I believe.
Okay. Wow. Red is asking, what is this guy's channel? He sounds familiar. Do you have a channel?
Yeah, I have a channel. I just got it running. I used to stream a lot, but I kind of took down my gaming content, and I've got it back up now. I've got Destrange is basically my political and social commentary, ranting. Zippy DSM Lee is focused on, creativity, media, games, stuff like that.
You can post it.
Put 2 more up
as a comment, and then everybody can find it. So,
all right,
yeah, that'd be great. So Red was asking. So yeah, absolutely. Wow, this is just a lot to think about. So you're saying what you see right now so far, Lee, in this Digital Copyright Act of 2021 is this doesn't do anything to improve, I guess, current IP law in your perception.
Floodgates to more litigation. That's all it does.
Okay. Wow. This is crazy stuff.
I don't know how YouTube will treat this because YouTube doesn't give you simple links like Twitch does. That's for the Strange.
Okay.
My creative content is zany, silly. Let me use.
Okay. Well, I think Mictobus just posted a link to your YouTube site.
Let's see, which one is that? The Strange or? Yeah, that's the Strange. I put that one up too. So here's the other one.
Okay, so let me switch accounts here and see if I can go in and.
It'd be nice if it. I guess YouTube has so many users that you have to get a bit of fame before they'll let you have a www.youtube.com your name here.
Yeah. So I'm going to is for people in there. I'm going to post it. I think I've got it up now. So I think we're in good shape here. So that's it's good stuff. So
Yeah, because the way YouTube does their demonetization, I'm trying to keep my channel separate. I know one, Zippy Lyrics is going to be demonetized, but I don't really care. I just love fiddling with lyrics.
okay,
Zippy Labs is game modding, and that'll be random because random stuff in the games. Lollipop Chainsaw, the Lollipop song by the Chordettes.
yeah,
For a few years, it wasn't being hit on Twitch, but like a year or two ago, it started to get hit. So when it plays, you're muted,
okay, okay.
and it
Wow,
tends to play when you're at the vending machine buying stuff.
wow. That's,
It's just weird how but I believe that Five Finger Death Punch's Way of the Fist is still, they're not hitting it. But the Twitch has changed a little bit since I was streaming like a year or so ago. So this is going to be an interesting ride. I tend to play game music in the background. Only once in a while do they ever say, "Well, this is from a very fancy original soundtrack, so you can't play that." We claim that.
so what do you? So Lee, we talked about this too. Like, so what do you think about? In your opinion, should there be an amnesty for
Without a
somebody
doubt.
if they're notified? So I bring this up because right, if you go to major airports, if you go to major airports, there's a big container and it says like this is the drug amnesty box.
I
And
wonder what kind of amnesty Amazon got with Twitch, because they've owned that for a while now,
yeah,
and the music industry was not going after them, tooth and nail. They were just, muting the segments of the videos or muting the whole video if it had, if the scrubbers found content.
yeah.
But now it's, your channel might be in trouble if you do that too much.
Well, right. And this is the whole part too, where we start to get into what in the past, what is forensic, right? As these scrubbers go and they say, hey, like, this was posted. And I found some something that indicated like if you posted a copyright image, for example, and let's say unintentionally, but again, and take away intention, but let's say it was up on your web page, like it was to augment a web post or a blog post or something, and you're notified 3 years after that by the alleged holder of copyright that there is a statute of limitations of 3 years that has passed that then comes into play in the court. Like if you haven't been notified within this 3 year span, I did find that in some redundant places, but yeah, so one of the things like
on, current precedent, what they're doing in the courts right now with it, I think there would be, some, but if the winds change, they could go at it all day long.
yeah. So I would, how do you see this as censoring? How do you see, because here's how I imagine it could happen, right? Like someone could say like that's copyrighted content if you're posting something political or something about current events, which might go counter narrative, and it might be enough to get Twitter or whatever to delay your content for review. And by the time it's released, it would be no longer relevant to what's happening in real time. I guess how do you see this? And then I'm going to come back to this with, we talked about deep fakes. Like deep fakes are going to create incremental problems with intellectual property.
Oh, crud. I had a thought and then it went out my head. Okay, what was the question before deep fakes?
How do people Um, okay, let's say that I'm posting content, but suddenly I'm targeted by people not wanting my content to get out there. So they're saying, "Oh, it's a violation of IP." When maybe it's not at all, but that's just something they're saying because they know then
Well,
Twitter or whatever will react and
that's a
suspend
mechanic
it for
they can
24
use
hours.
to. That's just
Yeah,
another mechanic they have. That's just another tool in their bag to curate content. I, that's what I was thinking before. Is they're trying, much like an IP owner, they are trying to hone and curate their content to a point to where it's always making as much money as it can. YouTube delays a lot of videos when you put them up. I mean, you can go to the ULR, but people won't be notified until, it depends on where they're slotted in the curation system.
okay, yeah. Tell us more about that.
Um, well, channels like Jim Sterling's Jimquisition or Forgotten Weapons, or basically almost any gun kind of focused channel, well, they're going to be, a few dozen rungs down the ladder. It's the hip new stuff that will be, distributed first, and then next, and then next, and then next. They're trying to curate the information so they can maximize profit. I can't stand that because Walmart's doing it with their search engine, and I can't find the stuff I want because I have to deal with 50 items that they've curated for me, but that's not the item I'm looking for.
Right, right. Yeah. So we have that to deal with. Search engines, yeah, giving you 10 things that might not really pertain to what you want, but because it's been sponsored, it's going to show up.
Well, that's a good one from Andrew S. How do companies have copyrights when everything today is a remake, nothing is original? Well, that's kind of the point. They have to publish
Thanks, Andrew.
something new in order to keep the copyright. Or they have to publish something that's publish or republish. It doesn't matter if it's new or not, as long as they're publishing it, they can maintain the copyright. If they don't publish it, then after 20 years, it's public domain, or there's some time limit to it.
And so pretty soon we're going to have well, not pretty soon, but we're gonna have a larger embodiment of deep fakes. So I mean, you could go back, right? Well, like in the movie Forrest Gump, just
Computer generated people.
computer generated people, and actually then what's the question of, okay, is this person similar to someone who's authentic, right? Or is this where you're taking an image of somebody and then totally making them say or do something that they didn't do? So what is copyright, intellectual property look like with that? Um,
Well,
and I think it's pretty scary because we're getting there very fast. Like it was a year ago that California passed legislation, only state to do this, saying you could not post a deep fake of a political candidate within 60 days of a campaign, right? Now, how that was enforced, who knows? And there was a clause in there saying if it's obviously satire, you can do it. But what is obvious satire? And but they were the first to get on that. It was also in 2019, Congress held its first meeting about what they were going to do to combat deepfakes in elections. So anyway, intellectual property, like even my image, like if I'm uploading stuff to Facebook or Twitter or something in my image or a video or even something like this video, what is intellectual property of how might these laws interface? What if somebody goes in and they modify? So I'm saying something I'm not saying, or they're using me to advertise something I'm not advertising, or they're using me in a way that compromises my image, like my professional branding or something like that. I mean, what are you?
That common people have a basic copyright to their image or some sort of rights. But do you remember it's not as common as it once was, but character artists that make very kind of wacky, whimsical characters of people.
Right.
if you did like a full 3D rendering of that, that would probably fall under parody or satire. If that image itself is not, copyrighted.
Okay.
Webs within webs within webs, but basically, it's like Photoshop. The more close it is, the more it's infringement.
Right.
When it comes to other stuff, I think it would default to libel law, slander law. Intent and whatnot. What is your intent? Is this clause for libel? But it's mostly between parody and satire and libel law.
And what if I create an avatar, a 3D image that then I am putting out there to, to use, I guess, and someone then, copies that, I guess it would be a copyright infringement. But
that would be some form of infringement, I bet. It's just a shame we can't own our DNA or our data that they're selling.
Holy smokes. Wow. So you gave me, points. So I'm just going to go over them and let me know if there isn't anything we've touched on. But what is IP? So and also, if my understanding is correct, like if I were to take a picture, the moment I take that picture, there is a certain amount of intellectual property right that is assigned to that picture. If I go out and I'm taking a picture of a snowfall in my backyard, I have some copyright to that image, that authentic image. So what is IP? And then problems with IP in current times. Also leading to
time. My brains are on slow time.
Oh, also talking about like banned accounts, block content, censorship, how you can improve IP. So also your thought on that, Lee, was something like, a more accessible database to tell you what's been licensed and what's not, and that you would pay in this database to get a license or something. And
if we're going to make it this complicated, there needs to be kind of a universal database that has a lot of easily accessible public data. That way you can find who owns what, and then if we have a system that is that easy, then the license makers will make licenses where people could use them easily. One of the problems we don't really have that right now is because, high and best use. You have to pay an arm and a leg in order to get a license. But if they were more common and easily taken up, the price and use would, the price would go down and the usage would go up. But they don't really want to create a system that's user friendly. They want it top heavy.
So what I'm thinking is, we talked about this too, of like music. Well, back in Napster, LimeWire, 25 years ago, people going online and
e-donkey.
And then what happened was, like, for example, Amazon. If I want a song, I can go on Amazon, and for 99 cents for the most part, like I can just buy it and download it in a high quality MP3. But so do you see that system maybe happening for more intellectual?
Well, Napster, a few years after the Metallica lawsuit, a few years after that, they went legitimate. They went as kind of a subscription-based service, not quite kind of like iTunes, really, where you could just download the whatever's on the thing. Oh, I don't know if that would happen much with music, because we've got iTunes, we've got Amazon. The market will only bear so much, but the main, the biggest IP owners will go to the top 5 or so biggest sites and just, blow off the rest. They have no interest in, doing anything that's going to not make them the most money they can make.
Right. Wow. So what are some takeaways for people? all from, okay, someone's like, okay, like I've done videos, and my tendency in videos is sometimes to stream like,
Yeah.
a minute of something that was,
Well, I think there's like two types of common video and maybe two or three types of quote unquote business video. For common, you're just basically doing things for the fun of it. And frankly, it doesn't matter if your channel gets demonetized because you're just having fun. I mean, if they whack it, you'll make another one.
okay.
I mean, it is what it is, but you don't, until they actually want to go after each individual drop of infringement, I think stuff like that will always go on. How they will moderate it will be based on their terms of service and if they're actually making money off of it or not. For business stuff, I would use caution on commentary and reviews, but in general, less is more. It's try and use as less as you can to get your point across fully.
So when I was on PBS, I used a segment of video which had been produced by somebody else, and I did, I worked with PBS and publisher and so forth. But anyway, PBS had this, like you can use 26 seconds. I mean, it was, and I used less than that. I used like 18, and fully cited it out, and of course, but it was really interesting that they had this kind of number for this presentation that, if you went over that, well, I mean, they wouldn't allow it, but so I guess another part of this is I don't want to feel like fair use is dead, or I don't want to, because I think there is, I guess if I were to use something, does it make sense for me to overtly say I'm critiquing like this picture, right? Or I'm critiquing like this short video, or I guess I don't want to leave people thinking like fair use is out the window. But again, how do people even understand if they're, how to use this? Like Phil wrote earlier, like people aren't taught about Creative Commons, or really not taught about fair use, but what if there is authentically, like I want to critique something that is out there. I'm critiquing the video, the audio itself.
Well,
do you overtly like make a statement when you post it?
I understand.
I am critiquing this.
Reviews and commentary and whatnot. The less you use, the more likely it is that they won't bother you. That's something to keep in mind. Right now, though, I think that fair use is fairly adequate for, commentary, as long as you're not playing the whole thing. But, the more you use, the more you get to that line that each individual site has. One site may let you do half a thing and you get monetized. You do more than that and it gets deleted.
Right.
You really have to just be aware of what you're posting on.
Would you advise, would your thought be, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to put something right at the front. I'm going to say, like, I am critiquing this, or this is for satire, or if I'm posting this image,
that makes
like
your intent clear, but the judge will still have to figure it out.
But wouldn't it help with, at least if you're claiming like a fair use, you're claiming something that
you can claim fair use until you're blue in the face, but there are lines that once you cross them, there's no defending it even to the thing unless you've got the license.
Right. No, I get that. Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, I would think it would help you if at the time of whatever.
Yeah. It makes me feel better to say that copyright infringement is not intended.
It's not intended. And yeah, if I, I'm posting this, without any intent, and if I'm made aware of it, will remove this content or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. That almost sounds like a
It helps, but really, right now, the system is if they find a nail, they'll hammer it down. Now, that might, right now, mainly that's just, content. You'll get muted audio for whatever is copyrighted, or you'll get a deleted whatever,
okay.
deleted post. That they are shifting more to monetizing whatever they can. So a lot of IP owners that were at first, just kill it with fire, they've come around to, oh wait, YouTube will pay us for our copyright, even though this person did all the work, who's advertise, who made this little advertisement thing, whatever's making, generating money. They'll say, okay, we'll go on to this monetized thing.
Gotcha.
It would be
So
nice
that,
if the monetized system was, simplified to where you could, join it, but then they would create, so many vague rules that you won't know what to follow.
right. So that works probably pretty well for audio. For video, it would be harder because they're not going to monetize your blog site or something like that where you're not getting
I
any.
wouldn't necessarily say that. It's kind of like it's all copyright. So they can do image scans, they can do, audio scans, of course, but they also, Twitch and YouTube both, they scan audio. I mean, they scan video.
Right.
So everything is up for grabs. It just depends on if the industry is willing to, put the hammer down and go full throttle. They're trying to with Tillis, but hopefully it won't. If it gets passed, well, YouTube's going to. I want to say that YouTube would lose money, but there again, it might make it easier for YouTube to have licensing deals with them, with the industry, but it's all kind of nebulous. The courts are nebulous. It's a vague mess. It doesn't really have to be. We can protect the IP owner interest and the common user interest, but we're putting everything on the IP owner and the industry and giving them too much, I believe, because it comes back to killing small business.
Wow. So what are some closing thoughts for, again, people with blogs, people who are YouTubers, people who are just kind of passively doing things like, hey, on my Facebook, I'm sharing out this image, but I'm not exactly sure where it came from, or it's been made into a meme and things, I guess. Knowing, after listening to this, what are some ways people should, at least, what should they have learned, and maybe how should they apply it?
Be more aware of anything that you use can be copyrighted. I don't want to make them, go crazy over it, but just be aware that there is a possibility. So if you're really focusing your effort on whatever your creative content is, if you're really putting a lot of effort into it, be sure to be aware of it and try and dial back on anything that's possible infringement, just to save you headaches down the line.
I think one of those things right out of the gate is just searching for some image,
Yeah,
right, in a Google search,
is a good reverse image search.
and so doing that step immediately puts you in a better position.
Google also offers a reverse image search, but you have to dig through their apps.
Okay, so yeah, like a reverse image search,
Yeah,
anything you can take,
and they'll scrub the web for it. I tend to use 10i because I don't want to use Google for everything.
and anything you can take authentic, or even if it doesn't need to have like an image or something, and yeah, so and as far as like audio, well, I think we kind of already talked about gaming, that's not like it was maybe 10 years ago, Nintendo.
I think that it's mainly, top 40 get scrubbed the most. This is what I hear streamers say a lot. It might be, they might be wrong, they might not. But, if it's any song in the top 40 in the past, 30 years, I would not try it. Frankly, when it comes to normal, music, I wouldn't try it. Video game music, except when you get into the extra special soundtracks and whatnot they do, just regular video game music is, I've never been hit with any type of claim just having that going in the background. Now, for something like, I have the soundtrack to the medieval PSP version. Oh
Okay.
boy, do they! It's a Sony game, and the music makers are some music writers, or they do a lot of symphony music and whatnot. Oh boy, YouTube would not shut up about it.
Okay.
Because they own the rights to the music, or they are part of the chain of rights to the music, and they are very litigious. But Sony, never got anything from Sony, so I'm assuming that they might be the primary licensor in that deal.
And I think I'll come back to this point of, there are more and more companies that are coming together, who are saying, who will contact people and say, this is a copyrighted image, and if you can't prove that you have copyright to this, you owe us X amount of money. And I've been hearing this also too, like when I've taught my courses and consulted. So it's people taking advantage of these things. So of course, like never just, or if somebody, just never pay out a blank payment, to somebody because of these accusations.
Always double check before you, if it smells like a scam, it probably is a scam.
Yeah. And they've gotten much better, at how they put this together. But again, I think they're I don't know, fear tactics, or, just, there are people in general who want to feel that I did this and I didn't mean to do it, so I'm going to try to make it right, and I'll make this payment. But I just see that coming through more. And, it's really weird because, like, this whole IP thing, I'm kind of thinking of background, like ransomware. Who knows, like who, you could have some weird thing where somebody like starts at, saying a ransomware attack because you violated IP or something like that, or who knows? I mean, I don't know what that would look like. But
before I lose my train of thought, I forgot about this one little thing with Fortnite and PUBG. They're battle royale games, but
yes.
this is what happens when an IP owner has too much money. They sued each other over a skillet.
Okay.
You had a skillet as a melee weapon, and they tried as all heck to copyright it.
So tell me about that.
Okay, I don't know who was first. I think it was PUBG. They basically had a skillet as a melee weapon, and Fortnite just copied it, but it's just a generic skillet, in the style of Fortnite, which is kind of more cartoony than PUBG, but it's just a skillet. But they tried to copyright something that's basically a common image.
Okay.
Even if it's modeled in 3D, it's just kind of ridiculous what happens when they have too much money to hunt and peck test cases.
And that's where I think it can get scary for someone who's trying to produce original content, and not, and then suddenly saying what you've just produced as original, for example, is very similar to what I produced and copyrighted.
With multi tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars of lawsuits over infringement as test cases.
So,
but then again, I keep forgetting about how because the sites are protected, the individual content creators are not. So as long as the 230 remains intact, they can go after the content creators if they wanted to.
Right. Yeah, that's section 230.
PR.
So,
especially if it's a famous content creator. Because then you
Right.
have tens of thousands of fans going, disparaging their IP,
Right.
and their IP lowers in value.
Right. Well, as you said, the thoughts, the consequences if IP laws aren't updated. One is, we run into this log jam in the courts. We run into people afraid to produce content because they're going to be challenged on it. And intellectual property, I think right now, like there's this weird part, right, with 3D and I wrote about it. Well, this chapter in my book, the book's not released yet, but National Institute of Health say, there were like 3,000 people working together on mask and ventilator part design schematics. Everyone from like someone in the basement of their house to an engineer, to a college student, to whatever, and refining and sharing this stuff that actually then they like 8 items became distributable. I don't know if it's public domain when you talk about 3D or not, but basically these 3 items got
Depends on.
distributed. You could download it and you could produce it. But I'm looking at that saying, okay, like I get it, but also like somebody at some point is going to say this was built as an extension of a design which I copyrighted, right? There's no goodwill.
You are
I know that's from
manufacturing.
Cajun Navy Relief, right?
All
There's
under the rules of manufacturing. I've not heard of any cases quite yet, but as I've said before, with the gun laws, they look at it as manufacturing pure and simple. So the rest of the lawmakers and the legal system is going to look at that as a manufacturing issue, a manufacturing rights issue. And as for, you as someone who's just making it to help others, there are probably, local or state liability laws that you might be, on the hook for, but we don't really know until we get more test cases out of it.
right. Right. It reminds me a little bit. So I had Katie Pashon on the show a few times of Cajun Navy Relief. So when there's a hurricane, for example, Cajun Navy, it's a civilian, it's a nonprofit. They're registered as a nonprofit rescue force. They come in and they rescue people from their homes and stuff. But there isn't any like amnesty for if they try to rescue somebody and they go across a live wire and everybody gets killed that's in this boat.
Well, you're
So
dead. You can't be sued.
what was that?
You're dead. You can't be sued.
Right. But saying like, they're doing this without any type of insurance covering the group to do this, right? So they come in and they're participating in this rescue, and I think it's very interesting right now when we talk about IP because in everything that's happened with the mask and ventilator parts and other types of things related to the coronavirus.
Liability.
What was that, Lee?
Never underestimate liability.
Yeah.
Because like with the restaurants and whatnot, they have libel, not libel laws, but they have laws and insurance and stuff to make it so if you get hurt, at the site and it's their fault and whatnot, that kind of liability. But the lawyers and the restaurants and stuff will overthink it, and it raises complexity and cost when all you really need is intent and outcome.
Wow.
But law wants to be more complicated than intent and outcome, and that kind of drives me crazy. But law, it is what it is. All you can do is try and figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and if I'm correct, I haven't seen any revisions to IP law that have been proposed that would, I guess, make things better, improve things, sensible. I don't see that anywhere out there. Is that your take? That
10 or so years ago, they did some fiddling with the DMCA. I forget what it was, but it wasn't terribly awful, but it wasn't that great either. I think they tried to do some balancing with it, but they've not really tried to make the system better.
Okay.
I wonder if they have the power as lawmakers to, if you want to, mass target infringement, then you need a better licensing structure. Something where people can come to you and get a simple license so you can get ad revenue. Some sort of, balancing mechanic to make things easier.
Right. Yeah. So in closing, Lee, some points, for people to take away is if you don't have to use an image that you haven't taken, just to add spice to something, it's best not to go that route because of the fact,
Yeah.
these algorithms, these scrubbers are
80,
indiscriminate.
90% sure it's best to not go down the path.
Yeah. So that's kind of a right off the bat, type of thing. And I think there's some value in, if you are, boy, I don't know, I don't even know if it makes sense to critique something that is copyrighted, unless you're prepared to take on the challenge of that. You and I talked about, Tom Scott had produced like an 8-minute video on that of, and I'm not even sure, but yeah. But I think the days of willy-nilly going to the internet and finding an image and posting it or making it your thumbnail, for, I guess like either a podcast or whatever, those are over because, of how things are scanned. I mean, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
that
Probably
wasn't
5 years, we'll see more of a lockdown on, well, what else can you call it? A lockdown on expression. Not
right.
everyone is able to create, but they can cut and paste things. So there is, creativity and expression and free speech involved in fair use and the distribution of IP. We need some sort of balancing mechanism that takes more things into account than distribution and the whims of the IP owner.
Well, right. Yeah. And we're getting into this strange world of censorship where something you post of original content, could be deplatformed because it doesn't meet the criteria of whatever the social media site is. So, you're taking a picture of something. It could be that it's not even a copyright infringement. It could be that it doesn't meet standards of the community, which is vague, right? But it could be the censorship way of saying, oh, before any image is made public, and it could be done to protect.
Yes, they've got enough in the standards to basically kick you for any reason, and I find that quite odd because they're making money off your data, so we're not being paid for our labor. That
Right.
brings a whole new train of thought, but that's a different, rabbit hole. But still, oh dear. If copyright doesn't get to be more open, then we are going to need, fair use, not fair use, but we need First Amendment laws brought into the modern age so our content on all these user sites is protected. They could easily have users, block each other through auto mods and just watching keywords and stuff like that, but they don't want to do that. They want to curate, and maximize money.
Right. Yeah, which is right. Right. It's going to be so, I don't know, commercially driven, and it's pretty scary to think about that. Wow. So again, some takeaways. Yeah, trademarks, about 3 years, and then it's upon who brings forward the trademark to, to defend it. I don't have a timeline on patents, but we know that copyright is this long time, that's out there. People who want to use fair use, be aware that if you're using this as it's basically a defense, and it's subjective to a judge.
I'm
So
looking at 17 years for patents.
17 years for patents. Okay. So 3 trademarks, 17 patents, and then something like 80 years, or there's some formula that plus the death of whoever created it, or if it gets bought up by
Well,
as
you
you
know
said,
what?
Disney.
If the cost is not too great for the average person, a couple grand is not unreasonable to have, full legal protection. And, we could always, make groups that help, small copyright, owners get their copyrights, protected. But there is such a gap in, well, this is copyrighted, but if it's, a final version, I can pay a couple $100 and get it fully copyrighted. Well, why don't we, well, yeah, pay a couple $100, get 17 years, but, after 17 years are up, you pay another $200 to re-up it. But I don't think that there's
Right.
it won't do anything to the big IP owners. It's just an annoyance for the.
It won't. And I'm kind of in the camp as I do feel there needs to be some amnesty level. Because basically, right, that's what YouTube does. I mean, YouTube is, if you have, upload something and they're like, here's 31 seconds of matched copyrighted audio. So one, you're not monetized. In your second option is you can, click and this will be deleted.
Definitely be something.
And I go back to the airports. You see these big containers at major airports, these amnesty boxes. It's like, if you have drugs, drop them here, and there won't be consequences. I think if something like,
but even that, it will help common users, but the whole industry is still kind of broken.
Right. It doesn't fix the industry. I think what it fixes is because it's so easy to create a blog or some, a channel or whatever.
Want to criminalize it, have an easy way out for.
Right. And maybe someone could still be pursued or something like that, in court, but at least like there would be some amnesty, option. And I think because this has become so easy to do, right, to make a blog, to make a YouTube video, to do a podcast, and if you're made aware of it, that you would, because
you can either get rid of it, mute that section, or have it monetized. And
a cease and desist, right? A cease and desist order.
Just as drop dead right there.
Kind of it, and if you decide to go beyond that, well, then kind of you're taking things on your own. There was a question here from Bacon Maldito, and this is a good question. So Lee, like, what if you take a image of a Subway sandwich, or do you own that image of the Subway sandwich, or like the Mona Lisa? You go in and you take an image, take a photo of the Mona Lisa. So now,
I would say that yes, in the case of the sandwich, you could do it, but if it had, the Subway logos or the sandwich maker logos on it, that would be somewhat problematic. But yes, you could put a copyright on, your unique individual photos. If they actually accept it, I don't know. There's a unique factor, there's a uniqueness factor to, or a scarcity factor to copyright. But for the most part, if it's unique, it's easily copyrightable. I mean, Star Wars lightsabers were copyrighted for years. You couldn't use the word. You couldn't use the word lightsaber.
Right.
And then eventually, the copyright kind of just they stopped trying to be litigious about it.
Yeah, I mean that. Right. So
they also had problems with knockoffs, but the knockoffs weren't, direct copies.
Right.
I think at the beginning it was close enough that they could, stop, the knockoffs. But over a while it became so ubiquitous that they couldn't do anything about it.
So yeah, if I'm taking a picture of the Mona Lisa, and that's really all that's in the picture, right? Maybe a little background on either side, but do I own that picture, or
You
I'm
own
taking a
that
picture of
instance.
a copyrighted work?
You own that instance, that specific instance, that data. Now, it might be so common that you can't actually protect it in court, but that's how the system works. There is a good chance that you can protect it.
Right.
I mean, there was the Grumpy Cat stuff 10, 20 years ago, where all the pictures of that particular, I forget the name of the cat, but you've seen them. There was
Yes.
copyright over that, but I believe that was the image that they took of the specific images they took of the cat that were under scrutiny, and not just more generic, but uniqueness is kind of everything to copyright.
So what Bacon's writing is, he said, I meant the image itself, not a direct
Yeah.
copy of
If
anything.
that instance of the image that you took, it has at the very least a 50-50 chance of being copyrightable. You'll be able to submit it for copyright, and they will get back to you. In
Okay.
general, I think you would have a hard time trying to protect that copyright without some sort of limited rights thing granted by the Copyright Office. Pay your $200, get it processed, whatnot, and then you could go to town with it. But then again, the courts probably aren't going to be too happy dealing with common stuff.
Right. Wow.
And that's kind of what some people say, that Trump should repeal the 230 section 230 that gives the websites protection. But
Right.
if they do that, then the websites are going to purge everything that does not meet their curation needs. So that kind of creates a double-edged sword situation where it's probably not the best way to go about it.
Because my understanding on 230, and I did a presentation on this a couple of years ago, was, in a nutshell, it removes some liability from the site owners for the content that's placed on their site, with some exemptions, right? If you're posting like human trafficking, information on a site, like, you're not protected from that. I mean, the moment you'd be made aware of that, you'd have to take that down, and then also, do protective measures. But you're right, Lee. I mean, if Section 230 goes away, then on the safe side, everything will be purged, because no corporation, no social media, big tech is going to want to take liability for what's posted on their site. So
a run for their money.
So yeah, that really is going to create some. Yeah, Andy Warhol painted a can of Campbell's soup. I think I remember that. I remember. So wow. Yeah, I am. This has really been intriguing. To have this discussion, because I definitely see this creeping up more and more. For example, when I taught, Lee, courses for the last 17, 18 years, no one talked about this until like a year ago.
Well, we are putting more and more of ourselves into the data stream, and IP law works on distribution. So parts of what we do are going to be caught in the system. It's kind of that simple. If we kind of have some sort of online life, it's going to distribute something that can be considered copyright infringement.
Right.
And
Right.
there's something in the back of my head that I'm not 100% sure, but I think museums may have some sort of rights claim. I am not 100% sure, but they might have some sort of rights claim on the images you take. I am not 100% sure, but I want to say that, okay, well, that sounds half right, as screwy as the system is. That could be a thing, but
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. That's really something you have to talk to the museum about.
Yeah, it seems to me, yeah, that
Because
would.
there again, a museum is not always a public place.
Oh, right.
Public
Wow.
places, as long as there's no people in it, or especially nowadays, no children in it, it should be, relatively easy to copyright.
Right. Right.
Because when there's people in it, you need, oh, I forgot the word, but you need some sort of consent.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a number of friends, yeah, who are YouTubers, and if they're going like outdoor stuff, but they make sure they're not capturing anybody who might be hiking on a trail past them or anything that could be identifiable. So I mean, make sure they don't get their face or anything like that. But wow. All right. So Lee, like in wrapping up, anything people should be like watching for? Anything on the horizon? Anything like people should do immediately when they're done listening to this? They should be like, oh well, I gotta check this.
Interest in. I don't know of any news sites or article-driven, sites that focus on intellectual property, but let's see, TechCrunch, Ars Technica sometimes have decent articles. Torrent Freak complains about it. They post a lot about what the industries are doing, who they're suing, what they're suing on. And sometimes those articles give you a good breakdown
Can you post
of
those?
what the fulcrum is.
Can you post that website in your
Torrent Freak?
in the chat right now? So, and I've also, I mean, I've talked to lawyers who only work in IP to help inform, my legal courses, and they've echoed also what you've echoed, Lee, is one, try to stay under the radar, right, on this stuff the best you can. I mean, if you're out there and you're posting a blog and you have 3 images per blog post that are copyrighted, you're much more likely to be identified and so forth. But, and I think Phil brought it up earlier, educate people about this, like be aware, at least Creative Commons. And when you get something, and I guess, how do you find something that is free to use? I guess, how do you, is there a site like
Public domain has a few things that you can look up, but you also have to double check the license. Not everything in public domain has. There's a lot of sites, a lot of little music sites that have free to. Public domain is one thing. Okay, there's free to use stuff that's not that's not public domain, is free to use with a caveat if you're streaming or something, you need a license. You have to really be aware of the license of the thing that you're going to use. Like if you go to a site that's, there's sites that, sell like clip art sites and
Right.
other little things like that. You can buy the thing to stream. And that's, perfectly legal and everything. And then there are sites that say you can do one thing, but the fine print is no.
And I think it's printing off and also keeping like your copy of that you have permission to use it,
because they banned Torrent Freak.
Because I mean, I subscribe to an annual, I think it's Story Blocks or whatever it is. I pay an annual fee, and whatever I download,
I don't like some links.
I'm able to use Story Blocks. Yeah, so I'm able to use it even if I stop the service, I can continue to use my downloaded audio. Um, so, but I printed off my agreement, because what if Storyblocks goes bankrupt in a year, or something gets bought out or something like that? I mean, and someone is challenging me 3 years from now on, some music that I have in a podcast that I released a year ago. At least now I have documentation of saying I have this, and if a push comes to shove, I have a copy of my, payment for this and all of that. But I don't know if it gets to that, but I mean, maybe it does. So, still there, buddy?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. We're having trouble with one of the links. They probably blocked Torrent Freak as a link, but you can still post the name of it. It's not illegal, but it's gray area enough for them to turn their noses up to it.
Okay. All right. So Torrent Freak, and yeah. Wow.
It's just one of those kind of gray area things, but they do a lot of articles. They keep up to date with stuff. I've not found a good, website since, GamePolitics.com, went up. The ESA bought it and then just basically shut it down.
Okay.
Well, they didn't want to spend money on it. They couldn't make money off of it because it was deriding, well, the ESA, it was, it was keeping on, it was keeping on their toes, it was, talking, about they shouldn't be doing this. They should be, working more for the consumer. That, it was kind of like a consumer resource type of site that lets they talked about, the laws dealing with video game censorship. What's his name that wanted to ban GTA, 20 years ago and stuff like that. They talked a lot about stuff like that. And we don't really have a good.
No, we don't. And
I've at least not found one.
Red Crusader made a great point here in the chat. He said, isn't it scary in these days to pay to essentially rent usage of content from online websites like iTunes and Steam? And you're right. I mean, we're renting things these days. That's
what they want. They want that steady money in, and then when they control all the points, it's like with you might not be aware of this, but mainstream games are somewhere between $50 and $70 a pop. In the olden days, they were maybe like 10, 15 years ago, they were maybe $10 less. But they printed thousands and thousands and thousands of discs. So you have that secondary market of used, but also new wholesale to compete with new prices. But today, why do they need to ever lower the price?
Well, right.
Microsoft has at least, gained some, sense of awareness, and their Game Pass is actually pretty decent. $20 a month, and you get to play just about anything you want. I mean, a lot of the newer stuff you have to buy for $60, $70, but a lot of other things, it's like Netflix for gaming in a way.
Yeah. Well, I'm having a new computer system built, and
Ryzen.
What is that?
Ryzen or Intel?
Well, it'd probably be Intel, but I'm having a person who's built some of my previous systems is building like a new system for my studio down here. And, but he said, you know what, like you should really consider going Linux, because so much
I've been trying.
So much of what's out there now is subscription based for Microsoft Office 365 and whatever. And he's like, you'd be better off, buddy, going. I mean, just his opinion was going with a Linux.
Quite system. Used to my gibberish. Word processing.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, that was his take of you're going to enter into this rental agreement basically.
Oh yeah. Microsoft is probably going to be subscription based in less than 10 years. No, Windows will, you have to log on to Windows in order. The old, adverb, the old proverb in the Windows 95 days, in order to solve the problem, go online. But you can't go online.
Right. Right. So I mean, this also brings up a really,
You can't go online. You have to go online to go online.
deep thought of like, what is, your subscription base versus actually, quote unquote owning something. And God, I don't know, but
I think Blu-ray. Phil Henry made a good comment. Disc-based games deteriorate way faster, but I think Blu-ray disc lasts like 20, 30 years, and that's a decent return on investment. I think that's reasonably fair. Sure, cartridges will last longer,
right.
but you can print out a lot more discs as long as they're not too overly complicated at a reasonable price. Cartridges cost a lot more per game.
No. Yeah, you're right on. Um, so yeah, I guess, what do you think here in closing? I mean, what would be some takeaways for people, or some things that people have brought up and you're like, yeah, I just want to resonate that one more. I want to amplify that one more time.
I hate to say you can kind of dismiss it, but if you're just commonly posting things and not doing much more than, common usage, just random things, I don't think the system will be so sloppy enough to crack down on you. I think they are going to target, businesses, streamers, those who are generating money. They're the first, they're the first ones that will be, went after. The next line will be those who make, halfway decent photoshops. They put some effort into what they're, using to infringe, but they're not really, profiting off of it. They'll probably be next, but I don't think common users really have to worry too much. But for anyone that seeks to make, puts a lot of effort in it or seeks to make money off of it, be aware. Less is more. And if you can, check and confirm the license, copyright, whatever.
How do you do that? So you said check in, but yeah, what would be a
Google search.
way?
Just start with Google search and you see who owns it, and then you see, it's almost, find the lawyer that does all the contract work for the corporation. It's almost that bad, which does not help this situation at all,
Right.
because there's no easy path. Because, we have all this, we have all this, data that is so easily managed. Why isn't there an easy path? It's like I say, for PC games, we should have had, end user transferable keys, a decade ago, but they won't give us that. They want to sell, one off key to us directly. And if we lose our account, well, too bad for us.
Right. Yeah, you can't retrieve it. Right.
There should have been a, all-in-one, system that the industry agreed on, like they have for, the industry, the big parts of the industry, two or three of them got together and made, Blu-ray. They got together to make, HD DVD. Microsoft was leader on that. CD-ROM. They got together to make those, standardized formats. We could have had that for digital licenses, where we could own the license and have, basically one account to deal with the licenses. And then, if we wanted to sell them off, they could take like a 5% fee off the top, though I'm not 100% sure if first sale would protect that or not. But licenses do have some limitations, but it would be something, carrot and stick. Sure, the industry has to, have all this used stuff that they have to trade, but they're also making money from it, so they can't really complain too much. Some sort of, we invest this money, but once we invest this money, it's gone.
Right. So we have a question from the chat. Sass Too Many wrote, What about screenshots? I know, I'm late to bring this up, but
Is it
so,
copyrighted?
so yeah, what if you're taking a screenshot of something on your phone?
Is it copyrighted? If it's copyrighted, then there is a small chance lightning will strike. If it's not easily found, then you're probably fine.
Okay.
Until they make the laws where the floodgates are opened up and they get tired of going after the richer people. And I hate to say that, but that's kind of how it plays out.
Right, because I think the point, as you said, the technology has progressed to the point, and this is what the IP attorneys have told me. The technology is there, and it will just get better and better with each passing day to scan web pages and to find these things. Now the question will be, it costs. There is a barrier to bring a lawsuit up against someone for copyright violation. Like if it's you or I that has like a blog, there's nothing monetized on the blog. There's no money being generated. The intent of this wasn't to redistribute this image and make money off of it and things like that. And right now, what I've been told by some of these attorneys is saying, it's going to cost someone $1,000 or $2,000 to bring a lawsuit. So so there is this barrier to that. So I guess what I was trying to get at that too is, that is something that if someone is going to litigate or try to sue you for this, they're going to be putting some dollars in on their side, versus like these third party, companies that just claim that they are representing, a copyright holder, and they're not. They're just trying to extort you. But so I don't know for what that was worth. But I think as you said, for an individual, it's probably unlikely. But what is most that you're going to be litigated against? What's likely though is that these scrubbing software will find an image, and you'll get notified of it and possibly tried to be extorted. And you can just do a quick internet search, anybody when you're off of this, and find examples of that. And that's where you need to have some awareness and some due diligence of saying, I'm being scammed, with this. So whether you're consulting with or contacting a lawyer with that or whatever, but I mean, just as a word of caution, like if someone is saying, hey, like this image showed up in your website from 2 years ago or whatever, it's copyrighted, you owe us $900 and you have to send it in Bitcoin to this address in a foreign country. And we only accept, whatever during this time frame. Well, there are numerous, obviously, red flags with that. But yeah, and you're right. Like, I don't know who would you go to on stuff like that, whether it be police or whether it be like actually contacting an attorney and an IP attorney and putting a couple $100 out there. I mean,
scam, the police just don't call 911 over it. As for, legal stuff, if it looks legit, the EFF is still taking, they'll EFF.org, Electronic Fighting Foundation. Oh gosh. Oh Lordy have mercy. Brain fart. EFF.org. At least that. Electronic Frontier Foundation. Basically a group of lawyers that try to navigate stuff. And they will give you some idea of what's going on. And then if you want to, if you want very involved help, you'll probably have to, pay something.
Yeah.
They're a good
if you can post that down. Yeah. There you go. Electronic Frontier Foundation, because it's, so Bacon Maldito wrote, what about back copyrights? Like if an image in one of your books or blogs somehow gets bought, your material is sold. I think we kind of talked about that, but
yeah, if it's copyrighted, if it doesn't matter what it is, if it's copyrighted and it's being distributed by you in some shape or form, that's infringement. If the system cares or not, there's no telling.
And even if I bought that 3 years ago and it was, for example, in a public domain or whatever,
I'm
if it
not sure
has,
that there's any type of, protection there.
I don't think there
I'm not
is.
sure.
I
But
don't.
it sounds
I
like
don't.
the perfect loopholes the system likes.
Right. What I've been informed of is, if you bought it or if you used it at the time, well, if you bought it, you had a license, right? But if you used something that was in public domain 3 years ago, and between now and then, maybe the person who put it in public domain said, I don't want it in public domain anymore. Now I'm going to license it. And now if you're using it, and when you originally used it, it was public domain, but since has been licensed, it's upon you to check that that still is public domain, which is an incredible burden, right? So there has to be some relief in this process of
No,
saying,
they're going to have to figure out if it's either public domain or it's not. There shouldn't be a way to move something from public domain to copyright. There should be a caveat of there's so much change that this thing is, you have, you have two or three different types of Cthulhu board games, a couple different types of games. Because it's public domain, all these different rights owners can, play with it. This, but it, but the original mythos should not be able to go back into that. That just sounds like turning back the clock, and that's never a good thing.
okay, we had a clarification from Bacon Maldeo. He was asking,
Back royalties.
and I've
Again,
heard that, right?
That depends on what the wind is blowing and if the sharks take the bait.
So I've heard of schools, for example, saying we observe this on your website as of whatever. So like you do owe back royalties for this from like the date that it went up.
Well,
So
are they legitimate or are they not legitimate?
well, right. That's the thing is this third party company, and then some of these have been resolved also, not only taking it down, but then finding the original image and paying to license the image for like $10 versus
have a
like
lot of
900.
nebulous. The license works for certain things, but not other things, and some of that gets put up and misused. But it's a mess.
Right. It is a mess, and so it's good to have these discussions because again, as Phil Henry pointed out, we don't have we don't educate people about Creative Commons, about really even basic about copyright, trademark, patent. There should be a course, right? I mean, this should be a course that is required, just as people have to take a history or a civics requirement like this.
A couple hours, 3 or 4 times a year, or every other year for high school. Just.
Right. I mean, I had courses I had to take, once a year for different reporting requirements for like state things or whatever. And it seems like this should be, not to add into it though, but there should be some required, if you're working in business or anything where you might be interfacing with intellectual property, which is almost any job, right? But you should have some course in this, right? Or if you're like the technology director at a company or something, there should be some required level of training. And maybe even that then gets into then more of like an amnesty, or more like you're providing awareness, because as you've said right now, it's like goalposts are moving all over the place. Judges will be making decisions on whatever comes forth and what not. It's
all buck it up to the higher courts, and the higher courts will take 10 years to figure it out.
I know I talked with one IP attorney, and so we were talking about the schools and stuff like that. I said, yeah, it's really unlikely, that this will probably be an issue with a school. But he said it could be, and there could be one school that somebody decides to make an example out of, and they go after them and end up with a massive either settlement or something. That was a thing in schools years ago. Like schools would use like protocols, for example, for test, and then they would run out of one, and they would go and photocopy it because they ordered 30 and there were 31 students, and then they got sued, and they got sued for like big money, like huge for copywriting. And yes, you can understand, but you can also understand like the circumstances of you're giving everybody this test and you run out of whatever because you just had 2 students move in or something. But yeah, so of course, in lawyer speak, it's like one of these things of, well, it's unlikely, but yes, someone could be fingered, like in Napster, LimeWire, they could point to someone, who lives in Indiana and whatever and say,
generally I almost want to call it white hackers. Basically, that it's quasi legal or legal, but they're basically hunting. They're able to actually use how they are able to use the file sharing service to be able to get the information and then backlog it to ISPs, because some ISPs openly give that data out to the IP owners. So Comcast and others are, if you get a lot of cease and desists for
right,
file.
and you're right, and that's the point. I think that I see it both sides, right? I see a cease and desist, but I also see like people are instantly sued and without a cease and desist or an amnesty option, especially if they're just small, if like they just have a blog or they're like, at least be like YouTube, give me the chance to take this down.
Yeah, but YouTube's doing that on their own accord, which is kind of, well, at least in some ways they are trying. Twitch did kind of, but then again, I wonder if there was some sort of backroom deal with the music industry, because for a couple years, Twitch, had that old amnesty thing going, and then they no longer have it. It almost seems like a license deal ran out, and now it's, they're going after all the music they can. But
that makes sense.
It doesn't protect them against copyright infringement.
Red Crusader, our friend in Ohio made a point of saying, if you're an LLC, that's different than being an individual. So, as far as like, if you're going to be sued for, your blog or here, I guess here's what I see, Lee. Like, I know people 30 minutes from me who make $8,000 a month on their YouTube channel. Like, and so I think when you start to have that type of revenue, that also makes you much more on the radar.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of my points is if you somehow, tap into trade, trade's going to happen regardless of big business, regardless of businessmen. If you tap into that and, have some sort of incremental thing going back to the IP owner, they're getting money. Everybody's getting money from trade. But the way we have it now is it's just so lopsided.
Right.
That it makes it, that because the system's so vague that it just starts killing off small business because, well, it's legal.
Yeah. Some of the stuff I read, it was like, a small business that had put an image on a, I don't know, flyer or something like that. And, they ended up, being sued for $5,000-$10,000 or something. But yeah, we talked about this before too. I think there's this whole aspect of people are going to become very hesitant to create content also. Or else if you create content, what will be the motivation to create sellable content when there's not a good way to sell it?
Fan projects would get shot down with much more nukes from orbit. I mean, it's bad enough on fan projects whenever they pop up, they get C and Ds, but at least they can kind of exist in the background. But this absolute control over distribution is just hurting the generation of new trade.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
But definitely amnesty would be a way between amnesty and expanding fair use a little bit, or at least have some sort of hard time rule. That would,
no, you're right, Lee. You're right, because we have bankruptcy, right? Bankruptcy law. No, I'm not trying, but I'm just saying, like, you would think that if you in today's, I mean, nobody imagined, right, 20 years ago that you'd be able to do what we're doing right now. That even like a one-time amnesty declaration should maybe be in the works for someone who's deemed, a small whatever individual entity or
just a small whatever. I don't think it's worth, because there's so many of them. But then again, the system might decide that because there's so many of them, they take priority over the middle webs within webs.
But yeah, I think there's something to that, though. I think there would be some sense that would be almost some amnesty, because otherwise
something a little bit more than, okay, the judge looks at it, okay, dismissed. I mean, if it has to go to court, it's costing us so much money to adjudicate it.
No, it is. I mean, it is. Yeah, that was one thing. When I was getting information for my courses, the attorneys were saying, if they're bringing this forward on the other side, they've invested a few $1,000s already in it, not including, the time it's going to take in a court, and courts are already backlogged, because of shutdown in-person stuff with coronavirus. So, but I mean, just in the big picture, right? As a court system, how much of this should constitute what courts deal with? I mean, because this could become 50% of what courts deal with,
easily,
under the right circumstance, or under certain circumstances. Of
the more they're able to find it, the more they see nails.
That's it. So the more that they can find it, and find in what's out there, so then it becomes.
And then the courts are going to be like what a lot of police do with pot. I see nothing. Nothing.
I think you're right. I think I agree with you. I agree with you, Lee. I think there's going to have to be like, well, yeah, right. If you're caught with whatever, amount of marijuana, then it's not going to be a prosecutable thing. And I think you're right on to make it.
They are trying to legalize pot nationwide. And then, the states can deal with it, which is, moving forward, it's progress.
Right. Because you would cripple a system by having all of these cases brought into it. It would grind it to a halt.
Pretty much every every law that is based around victimless crime. I hate to say that. I mean, there are other ways to deal with addicts, like public safety and insanity and things like that. There are ways to deal with it, but we want to criminalize. Jails and bullets are only going to dig us deeper into debt. Right.
No, I mean, it's a terrific point, and I think it's really an awesome point, considering where we started in this discussion, to come up at the end of saying, this probably will, or at least logically could, track the way of like decriminalizing small amounts of controlled substances, because of the fact also that it would occupy so much of your resources for court systems and enforcement, right? That it simply would not, it wouldn't have a cost benefit return to society on it. I mean, if
that's one of the things, law, like with big business, big government, just, it tries to spend its way out of problems. At some point, sooner or later, you're just going to have to let people do what they do and try and figure out the best way to let them do that without, spending yourself into a hole.
Well, right. Cause you're right on with that. And
I know that's a whole other rabbit hole, but it's kind of all the same. We make things so complicated and then wonder why they're so complicated. Right.
Yeah. This is intriguing, to kind of think long game on this. And the short part, at least to my knowledge, again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not representing as that I have special legal knowledge, but But it was also, if you are contacted to try to settle on this by a third party of
Always
saying like
verify.
you're fined, you need to heavily scrutinize that,
Oh
or
yes.
to have a professional, because otherwise, this isn't like, um, how should I say this?
This isn't like something you get sent from a creditor.
Right. This isn't something also like you get something saying, hey, like you went through this traffic light and we have the picture of your license plate and whatever, and here it is from the police department, where there's a number on it when you can call and verify and all this other stuff. But so I want to make people aware of this, because I think a lot of people are being extorted by this process right now, of these third parties who are claiming that they are the enforcers of this. And I know, I mean, that's what the IP attorneys are telling me, and I'm hearing it from other people too. So be very, very aware of that, and do your due diligence, or even if you have family or friends or whatever, because if someone's like, hey, whatever, and you're pay $1,200 to us and we'll be all good, you need to look more into that. And you've given some links and some access and some things to do that. And I don't know. I mean, it's a good discussion, because I think one of the cases, I don't know if you and I talked about it, but I found one, it was like a church that had an image they put on their bulletin a couple of years ago. And then they were sued for copyright infringement for using this picture of like a sunny day or something on the front of their church bulletin. And anyway, I don't know how that ended up or anything like that, but it was kind of, weird. Because yes, I guess it is copyrighted, right? But it seems that there should be some amnesty provision put in there. And, I guess people could argue, well, you don't have amnesty for, speeding. Like if you're over the limit, and you could say, I didn't know I just merged on this road.
Well, this is more about speeding, but you're going to go before the judge and explain your situation. And that's, that's basically the same thing that we're doing with, copyright infringement. It comes down to, well, you'll either get lost in the system, so you never have to worry about it, or you have to go before a judge.
Right.
We kind of need a better, we need a better system, so we could, just pay to get on the toll bridge and, make money as we move. That's the whole thing about trade. It has to keep moving, has to keep cycling.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, everything gets stagnant, and
that's kind of how Hollywood is stagnating, because all it can think about is trying to maximize its profit. So all it can think is remakes.
Right.
This creates, not a diminutive return, but a depreciative return to content quality, because they have so much money they can just focus on gambling on what they create, in the hopes that it will generate more money, which is kind of how that goes, but they're kind of doing it the backwards.
Yeah.
Because they're gambling on if this will make a lot of money, versus gambling on if it'll make some money. They put all their eggs in one basket, in a sense, because they spend so much on films. And even video games nowadays are easily 50, 100 million, and they're trying to big companies like EA and Ubisoft are trying to churn out a game a year that normally took 3 or 4 years to make. So yeah, being a game developer is great, but that crunch time will. I wonder how many people go apply for disability after that. How many years they last? Because that can't. You're going to wind up getting broke by the system, and then what? But that's yet another rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's just wow. Well, Lee, I'm gonna wrap it up. It's been a incredibly insightful show. Touching on a lot of areas of intellectual property, IP.
Sorry for brain farts and rambling
discussion, and no, I appreciate we had thanks, Red, Sass, Mictobus, Bacon in the chat. This has really been uh, a very thoughtful show. So, anything you want to, any of your own material or where people can find you, Lee? Anything?
Let's see. Let's see. I've got the two channels on YouTube, Disrange and Zippy DSM Lee. Destrange is for political and social commentary. Zippy DSM Lee's for just general media content creation. I've got both Zippy DSM Lee and Zippy Destrange on Minds.com, the quote unquote rival to Twitter. Twitter doesn't like my word soup. Neither does Patreon.
Wow. Good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap things up then. So we've had a discussion on intellectual property. So you can go back. I'll do a blog post for this. That'll be out in a few days. And we'll be touching again on, what is IP? What are the problems with intellectual property? If you've got a blog, a podcast, anything out there where you might include intellectual property, what you need to be thinking about. Also, the extortion process that's happening, ways that this whole IP mess can be resolved, I guess, to be improved down the road. And just having those discussions of what might this look like even 5-10 years down the road, because we are headed toward some more substantial conflicting interest in IP. Between creators, between third party trying to jump in and kind of referee or take some money out of this system. And so, Lee, thank you so much for all the work you've done with making this your area of interest, because I knew very limited about this until you started to send me emails and we had talks about this.
Okay.
So, all right. Anything else there from Tennessee with our good friend Lee Jarvis?
Right now, Destrange is getting a little bit more activity because I'm not fully up to. I'm organizing my trailer so I can concentrate full time on streaming and creativity and stuff. So the Destrange stuff is a little strange.
Okay. And Red is asking, which one are you posting to more, Zippy?
I'm posting more to Zippy Destrange.
Okay.
I don't have Zippy DSM Lee up to full steam yet, but I'm trying to. I'll be on. Oh, I also got Twitch for both of them, for Zippy DSM Lee and Zippy Destrange, but I'm not really on Twitch as of yet. Oh wait, my Zippy DSM Lee is already there. I'm a dumbass.
Look at this.
Let's see, I have to switch accounts, but oh wait, no, well, it's there, but it doesn't easily give you links unless you're logged in. Okay, your channel.
Okay. Or yeah, like.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
So that's Destrange. Let's see. YouTube has a discussion thing where you can post. When you also can comment on that, and I can look you up through whatever you want. I'll go back on Twitter with one of my backup accounts. I don't really like using Twitter. I'm done with trying to navigate that mess. But we can talk.
Okay.
And to need somebody to keep me focused, because I kind of like to ramble.
Yeah, Bacon's indicating he's having some problems with the searches, but I think what you can do is you can send me some links and I can post those.
That's odd.
Because it seems like Mictobis is successfully able to find those. So
Let's
yeah,
paste and go. And oh yeah, oh wait, I'm logged in.
I'm not exactly what's
Log off, sign out. Yeah, I'm signed out, and that link is working.
okay. Yeah, I don't know I don't know what's going on here, but so all right.
Well, you know, like they want to curate the searches. It's very difficult to find, and you can't even sort playlists by play date anymore because they want to curate all the information. Drives me crazy when I want to watch, some history stuff in order, like the Great War or
Right.
Dan
Right.
Cliff, the boat war
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
You
No, I
know,
know. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I've had that happen a couple times too. And even some YouTube series stuff that didn't get put under a playlist.
it's nice
Like,
to play them, when they're released,
geez.
because all the little side comments you can kind of keep up with. If it's out of order,
Right.
where can I find the side comment? Oh,
I
it's
know.
crazy.
I know. I remember what was it a couple of years ago? iTunes said remove all of the numbers from your shows, or we're going to boot them off. So I went in and did that, and I know some people who didn't, and then iTunes just backed down. And but I'm like, oh, if I don't put a date on it or something, I need people to more easily reference. Because I have 153 episodes, I can't really say it's that episode about. I mean, I have the one IP episode, um, but yeah, it's kind of it's a weird system out there.
Episodes will have the
So
episode number in the title. They don't have to know.
So one of the things though I've taken away from this is I'm teaching another school legal class in spring, and I am going to specifically note to school administrators, work with your tech people and put together some type of basic IP training for your staff, because staff now have web pages, students have web pages, like right through the schools.
And employees have web pages, and employees get in trouble with employers.
All right, yeah, and some of that is a little more defined, like in their policies. But you're right. Like, and I think to overtly indicate, here's the training, here's when we had it, because this is becoming more and more common. Scrubbers finding things and so forth, and schools getting notified, and just in general, like, shouldn't people know this? Shouldn't staff and shouldn't kids know this as they go out? Because pretty much all employers want us, people to interact with social media, and everybody has a Facebook page for a business. So all of a sudden you get hired at a business as an intern, and you're posting copyrighted images or something that you're not aware of. And it just seems like it's a common knowledge thing, kind of like CPR and AED and stuff like that. Like, we've come into an age of everybody should have a minimum level of training in IP. And then I think with deepfakes, it's also going to be very essential to have
I
some
bet in the
corresponding
next
part of
2
deepfakes.
years that deepfakes will have some sort of mandatory law that has to state what they are. Because even in like 5 years' time, technology should balance off a bit more, where it's easier to create a fake person.
Well, you can do it right now. Little Michaela that Calvin Klein had out there.
But in real time, I'm talking about in real time.
Yeah,
And,
I would say 1-2 years away from that, being able to do that.
but it can kind of be done now, but it's not quite on the fly. But the more easier it gets to do, the more we'll have of it. The greater chance that law will be created.
Right. Yeah, that gets to be a whole other set. And then what is IP for something like that. And yeah, I don't so much.
Liability might not be enough to, a libel. I mean, well, liability and libel. I mean, my lord, it's kind of a
Well, you could
quagmire.
Right. You could create a deep fake that would, could tell people to harm themselves, right? A deep fake of,
Well,
that was something I was arguing in my PBS presentation. What if somebody does create an avatar that gets 1 million followers, and the avatar is telling everyone to, harm themselves?
that pretty much goes against general TOS. It's more like I think the little things are far more invasive than the more overt things. Because, well, we all know about China's, fake newsmen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So we kind of know about the bigger stuff, but it's the smaller stuff that makes me wonder that just as it happens more and more and more, that we will probably need some sort of law for it, which isn't unreasonable. It's just the lawmakers are dumb.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For me, I'm pretty amazed at deepfakes that, you know, not it's like California has legislation, and then Congress had their first hearing in 2019. And as I've talked to people in the intelligence community, they're like, whoa, like, this, we should have been having these discussions, 5 years ago, if not earlier, because this is rapidly developing. Um, but yeah, I think then that also is going to bring up this whole aspect of IP for avatar creations, for deep
By
fakes.
that time, I think we'll have a floodgate halfway open.
Something will have to happen, because the momentum of that will be through the roof, right? I mean, and then it not only becomes IP, it becomes protecting your own identity, right? Like your protection of who you are as a person. I mean, isn't it like the video games
I
for
don't know. I don't know if there's a legal definition, but if you've become somewhat of a public personality, well, no, I guess that's for just politicians. They don't necessarily have absolute control over their image and whatnot. Public
right?
public figures. It's
But I
the
but I still
actors,
think
actresses, and whatnot. They have very much control over their image
right.
and whatnot. So, of course, it would be the same, pretty much the same for average people.
But I mean, right? You could use this though to create something where it looks like somebody said something or a position they didn't, and they could be terminated from their employer. I mean, we've seen that already, where somebody has
Fake accounts.
um, a video that's on YouTube or something, and their employer says, we are separating employment with you because you've posted this video or Facebook image, or you were at this protest or whatever. And we've seen that, like, that's happened. But what if this is happening and it's not authentic? How deep are they going into checking it, to verifying it? Like, what if you had a pretty good video of a teacher who was saying some things that were very anti-student and controversial, and the teacher's like, I never said that, but it's a video of the teacher, and they don't have any other video. There isn't a simultaneous video where they can say, well, look at this video. It's like, this is actually what I was saying, this is what I was doing.
I
And
think
you could do that with people in custody cases. I think divorces in custody cases, when I talk to attorneys, they bring that up. They're like, oh, this will be the next thing. You'll get one parent will take this against another parent and say, look what they said, or look what they did.
Well, Alexa's recording you, so your sweeper bot's recording you. Vacuum robot.
Well, right. Yeah. Yeah. All of that stuff. But, that was a question of, where it wasn't a question, but it was saying this will probably be playing out in courts, like in like divorce courts and things like that, of one party trying to claim that the other either said or did certain things, and using deep fakes.
Falsely accused, and then a few years later, well, we were wrong. Well, my
Right.
life
And the
is
time,
ruined. But
because
this
when
is
it,
more, this is not between you and government as much as you and a business.
that's right.
Government is going to have to, some way, shape, and form, have some sort of, well, okay, this was fake, so you cannot hold them accountable for this because this was fake. That might be something that will be coming into law in the next 10 years. It would be nice if it happened to government, oh, we're sorry, we're screwed up your life. Here's a couple million.
Well, yeah. I mean, I mean, you're right. I mean, all of this stuff is going to have to be kind of worked out. But here's the thing. So, like, I asked school administrators. I said, if somebody came to you, a student came to you with a video, and they said, "This is a video of a teacher, example, saying inappropriate things during class or around the school in that school context or whatever. What would you do?" And they're like, "Well, we put the teacher on leave and all this stuff." And I said, "How would you verify that this is accurate information?" And they're like, "Well, we'd show it to our tech people." I'm like, would your tech people really be able to figure that out? They're like, "Probably not. Like,
The
we'd have to
courts
maybe."
don't really do images and video anymore.
Well, that's it. And so what if it's something that's not to the point where, it's a threat, but it's something that is against school policy, or it could be an employer, right? You could show an
Bad
employee swearing,
league.
like
Not super
in
bad,
front of.
but just a random, just something that they might have said, but they never said it.
Right. It's something, yeah. Or they're talking negatively about like a coworker, and someone says, "Here, they're creating a hostile work environment," and they show this video, and the person's like, "Okay, that is me in that context, but this isn't what I said." The thing is, like, the employer's HR department, they're not going to be able to filter that out. And
We're
as
not.
I've talked to police, they don't have the means to filter these things out.
Yeah,
They
we don't
don't.
really. We don't have the cyber police or even the cyber lawyers to deal with cyber crimes, and that's going to be the new thing for the next 20, 30 years.
Oh man, you're right. God, I mean, you are so right. And because I said, like, how would you do this? And they're like, this would take a team. This stuff is more sophisticated than what you think. But what happens now? People get put on administrative leave and separated employment.
A single person could do it. It'd take 10, 20 times as long, but someone who's very dedicated at it could probably do it themselves.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. You could do these what I would call hit pieces, which could destroy people's careers and also, the family impact and stuff like that. And I don't. And the thing is, to try to authenticate that, you have to prove yourself not guilty. Is how I mean, we see that happening, right? We see, oh, this is the video that came out and someone shot it from across the road with a camera, and people run with it. Like the media runs with it and whatever. Just think if it was more precise, that was put together through either deepfake or some engineered, because if this person is out of the workplace, it's better for me. I mean, I'm just saying these things happen. Like we see crazy things, or especially politicians, of
It doesn't help that
how it's going to play out in political realm, where you're going to see stuff and it's not going to be authentic. I mean, there's already stuff out there, like we've seen, that it's been made overt saying this is a deep fake of whatever.
Yeah.
But you can remove those layers, and if you start to go after everyday people, and again, this is where intellectual property, I think, needs to show
so many numbers that they're going to. They would probably have to start, tracking and logging more of our, usage to be able to deal with cybercrime. Privacy, what's that? Is it tasty?
Yeah. No, I see. And what you've said, Lee, has brought us to the point of really this becomes IP ultimately is going to revert back to an individual at some level of saying, what is your own intellectual property versus if people start taking images of you, photos of you, other things, and start manipulating those.
Inherent copyrights or inherent intellectual property rights. Because it'd be nice if you owned your own DNA.
No kidding.
Well, it's like any other quote unquote code. You could copyright it, but you would have to go through the motions. It's not inherent. So a corporation you'll get your DNA and copyright it. Now, I think that's happened before. I'm not sure how the court cases have played out.
Man, I'm trying to find this clip I had taken from some Russian video and I did That's the one where I had like 26 seconds, but that's God, I can't find it anyway. But anyway, they took still images, right, of like Einstein, for example, like 5
Yeah.
photographs, and then they animate it and made it look like he was like saying something from these
Yeah.
5 still images. And then they actually did it with the painting, like the Mona Lisa. They took it and made it appear like the Mona Lisa was speaking. But as you said, I think IP is going to branch. It's going to branch very much, right, even back to the individual very quickly.
I wonder if we'll ever get a real movement to questioning what we see. It feels like the way Twitter and Facebook and the way everybody's acting, it feels like what you see must be real. And that is
Yes.
extremely scary. People
Yeah.
should
What you see is all there is. Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. And what you see is all there is. And where does this go when we get down the road of 10 years from now? Holographic, presentations and stuff. I mean,
I've not seen any holograph systems worth a darn, but
I mean, eventually though, like it would get there, right? I mean, it would get there down the road. I mean, this would be a point where,
like with image technology, manipulating Einstein's photo and whatnot, you'll have that done with, real-time 3D, super hyper-realistic models, and it's kind of able to be done through, a couple bits of software. Of course, you'll need one heck of a rig to run it, but it's doable, it's quick, but that's at least 15, 20 years away, I'd think.
right? Which is in our lifetime too. I mean, so it's everything you think about today, and as you've talked about for IP, we're already behind the game in IP, right? But where are we going to be in another 10 years when people start to get this stuff? It's going to be absolutely nuts. I mean, it's just going to be crazy.
No, it's only going to be more nuts. Well, what doesn't kill you makes you nuttier.
So, with that, buddy, I'm going to wrap up this show.
All right.
But Lee, thank you so much for
no problem
enlightening us. It's a great discussion here on intellectual property, and I'll be excited to put the blog post together and get that out there for people. And please share with me any links. Just email them to me. I'll make sure I get them in the blog post. And everybody, thank you for listening to this show. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you, for subscribing, for sharing the show. The show's increased by about 40% in subscribers in 2020. So that's really been amazing. And actually, the number of episodes that get played and older episodes that are getting a lot of views have really increased significantly just in the last maybe 3-4 months. So it's all because of everybody, on the right-hand side, sharing, subscribing, making people, aware of it. So I greatly appreciate that. Again, as a disclosure, Lee and I are not attorneys. This wasn't about legal advice, which we said at the start. And you should always take this type of information with due diligence and work with any legal if you're seeking to learn more or to take action based upon intellectual property. But this does give you some terminology to understand. It does give you some good cognitive debate to kind of move around in your mind and kind of think about things which you've done in intellectual property. It's been a bit of definitely a scholarly show with some even prophetic type of statements in it, and so I've really enjoyed it. Like this is really kept a
use.
So, and I did see over here, it just popped up on my screen that the Green Bay Packers have defeated the Tennessee Titans by a score of 40-14. At Lambeau Field in the snow, and the Titans fall to 10-5. Green Bay improves to 12-3. So it's kind of big news here in the land of.
My day is listening to 102.3 FM in Chattanooga. I don't remember the Titans ever winning much.
So I don't know, Lee. Close to you, right there, the Titans. And yep, Tennessee 40-4. Tennessee's a good team. So Green Bay really had an outstanding game, apparently, right here, 40-14. But yeah, it's kind of funny. It just popped up and had some highlights, and the snow's on the field. So they just it's just kind of a scene for those of you. I'm in Wisconsin, obviously, so snow's not that uncommon to me. But if you're in a warm weather climate, to see a snow-covered professional football field is pretty interesting. So, all right, everybody.
Money if it's like a foot deep. That I would be interested in seeing.
Yeah, yeah, like a foot deep, and everybody's throwing snowballs at you. I think they had that in a game like at the New York Giants one time, where people were throwing snowballs, and someone was trying to kick like a field goal, and they kept throwing snowballs and knocking the ball off. And one time when I was at a game, so I was at a game at Lambeau Field. I went to every home game in the 90s, including playoffs. And I was at a game. There was a guy not too far from where I was sitting, which was I was like row 42 in whatever section. It was always the same thing. But there was some dude who stood up with a football and threw it onto the field during a play. And it didn't interfere with anything, but he immediately got taken out by security. And that was back in the days when security was pretty lax. I mean, I remember going to the stadium when they used to hand out cigarettes when you'd go in. But
oh dear Lord, those
Marlboro used to have boxes of cigarettes, and that was years ago. That was probably back in the 80s. But yeah, I remember this dude throwing this football out there, and he immediately. And I also remember, like, you'd get there early and you could go watch the players kind of warm up and be up on the fence, like right in front of the seats. And there was some dude who was putting a sign up, and whatever, go Packers. And he pulls out this huge knife, I mean, like an 18-inch blade knife, and he's cutting duct tape, and he's taping this sign up. And, back then, right, nobody made a deal of it.
Liability, lawyers.
It was back in the day when
there was when people didn't flinch about liability issues.
It was crazy. You think of some of
personal responsibility would deal with at least 80% of things, or maybe 70% of things. The stadium or whatnot, they can do some things, but
I mean, back then, I mean, there was you just went in the stadium. You weren't patted down, and I didn't even know there might have been security. I don't even remember security like at the entrances. You just kind of went through it. You had your ticket, and they ripped it in half. But
it's strange if they can do that nowadays with as much as they charge for tickets.
Yeah, I remember some of my tickets were like $22. I mean, I think I had a stack that I kept. And by the end of the 90s, it was maybe like $40, but now it's be hundreds of dollars. And it was funny too, because I remember games before they had jumbotrons, when they just had a scoreboard up on each end zone, and that was it. I mean, all you knew was the score and the yards, but that was it.
Do rules based off the video.
There was zero video. And at Lambeau Field, the first jumbotron they got used from somewhere, and they put it up, and it was basically like the size of a garage door, and everybody, we thought it was awesome, right? Because whoa, and today, I mean, it'd be laughed at, grainy and small and stuff, because now they've got this 80 foot by 30 foot high on each end, high definition, and which they're going to replace, by the way, and going with even like a larger one. But I remember, Lee, we were so excited because one season, this might have been like back in 1995 or something, they put in an out of town scoreboard in the stadium, and all it was is it just had like NO New Orleans versus like TB Tampa Bay, and the score in the quarter. And that was it, like just abbreviation. And we're like, oh my God, this is so awesome. Like, I can't believe we get out of, as we didn't have cell phones back then, so you really had no idea what was happening around the league. And it was, it's just so funny to think about today. All these high definition graphics come up. Everybody has a phone. Everybody knows exactly what's happening in every game. And but I remember like that out of town scoreboard was just the biggest thing. Like, it was unbelievable. So I don't know. It was kind of it was some fascinating stuff, going to games. Yeah, back then, but I don't know. So, and yeah, I've driven past that stadium in Nashville, so a couple times. So, but anyway, all right. So we gotta start singing Super Bowl. I remember some Bacon Road. I remember some guy with a beach ball at a Dodgers game trying to get the crowd to do some chant. Dude got tackled by security. Yeah, that'd be bad. Lakers played in the Great Western Forum. Oh God, yeah, the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles. This planet really needs to be hit with a massive solar flare that permanently knocks out all electronics. Well, what is TLDW? What does it stand
Too
for?
long, probably too long to read.
Didn't watch of the episode. This planet. Oh, Mictobus, are you mad at us? Or are we okay here, buddy? What's going on?
No, they're just saying that technology has kind of made us dumber. Oh, too long, didn't watch. I'm not hip on all the newfangled. That I forgot.
Oh, okay. There he is. No, we're good. So yeah, I don't know. I remember very vividly going to those games, at Lambeau Field before. And now it's like it seats 81,000, but it seats nobody right now, right? It's just the players. But back then the stadium was like 56,000. It was just this original bowl, how it had kind of been constructed, and there was a certain charm to that, a certain nostalgia, and to be able also to say, like, I went to games there before they had jumbotrons, before they just there is a certain lost quality to that. I don't know. It doesn't probably have anything to do with IP, but I think I think
people are a little bit more wound up. They're a little bit more worried about liability. They're a little bit worried about how randomly odd the world is, and it reflects in the stadiums and even the festivals and.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. All of that stuff is right. Is so measured, and having. I remember I went to training camp with my family a couple of years ago, and it wasn't really worth it. I mean, because I'm also baselining it back to, I remember when you could just kind of go up to the players and talk to them. I mean, I literally would go in with my college friends, and we'd go to training camp, and you just wait for the players to cross the road, and you could just walk right up to them and talk with them for a few minutes and whatever. And there was
celebrity status. It's just getting harder and harder to do stuff like that.
Now there's this multi-fence layer that they go through and all of that, and which I
get. They probably put the players through the high end boxes. Go and meet and greet the rich people.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a whole. I guess I have
game.
I've kind of burned out on a lot of the sports stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm glad Green Bay is winning and stuff like that.
It's another too big to fail commercialized mess.
Right.
It's all the like with gaming, the indie stuff seems to be a little bit more interesting and innovative than the super high end AAA content.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. It's crazy. Like I say, it's touchdown. Lee Jarvis, touchdown. Tennessee Titans. It's fourth of the day. It's in the third quarter. All right. Lee, I am wishing you a good night. Thanks again for being a guest here on the Safety Doc Podcast. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. For those of you listening, please tell your friends that have YouTube accounts, subscribe. We are going to crush that 300 mark, which was pretty cool. Considering we were about 200 here at the start of the year. And then, go and like, share. Again, there's 153 episodes. Every episode has a podcast or a audio podcast version on safetyphd.com. So, you can download that. And that also is leveled. So, They typically have good audio, except maybe the first 10 or 15. But and then there's a blog post, which is about a 3-minute read, which goes along with this. So if you're like, hey, I wanted to go back and pull out a couple of the main points from this, you'd easily be able to do that. And yeah, just thank you for the work that you've done in promoting the show. And take care, everybody. And Lee,
Fine. So it
hope
got
you had a good time, Lee.
boosted. What now?
Hope you had a good time.
Oh yeah, I did. Oh yes.
Good. All right, buddy. Well, I will catch you on the flip side, as they say, and take care in Tennessee.
You too.
This is the Safety Doc Podcast out here from the North Star Recording Studio.